Brooke Waters.
Hi.
Hi.
Jason Clark.
We just had a 2-hour conversation with Dr. Jerome Lubbe, which I'm pronouncing correctly. It's spelled Lubbe, but it's Lubbe. And you might catch a little bit of South African accent, although it's rare, but that's part of his story. You can find him at drjerome.com, and he also gives us some other locations at the end, some other ways to reach him. But wow, this is an amazing conversation, first of all.
Yes. I loved the whole approach of the whole identity that he talks about with the Enneagram and how all the numbers matter to some degree because they all make up who we are, and we don't just focus on one and then that's it. So that was really great. Yeah.
He refers to him, he's a functional neurologist. So first of all, he's Dr. Jerome, functional neurologist in Atlanta, Georgia, that believes in healing the whole person by rehabilitating their body, personality, and spirituality. And that's what we talked about. We dove into a holistic approach. He's has an amazing approach to the Enneagram, which is one of the reasons I was excited you were co-hosting, because we've had many Enneagram conversations, and I've always kind of tiptoed around, hey, today is the day you discovered Jason becoming a believer. Until today, Jason was a skeptic that could see the uses, not really a skeptic, but was a little bit like, I don't know, I think I'm doing it wrong. It's probably great. But the conversation we had and the holistic approach to the Enneagram, the ways in which he approaches it, his life story, the pain that he's navigated. You've got I'm a card-carrying member now of the believers for.
Well, and he's walking it out too. That's that's great.
Yeah. So we actually, Brooke and I both. So the first hour plus of this conversation is gonna be mind blowing, seriously, because we're talking to someone who is an expert in neuroplasticity, so walking through how we are changing, how we are transformed, how we are healed, literally healed. He talks about people getting out of wheelchairs, like rehabilitating the body, personality, and spirituality. Like it's a holistic approach to our health and transformation. The first hour plus is profoundly insightful, fascinating, a whole lot of brilliant theology in there. Yeah. And then he basically breaks down. You and I both had gone to his website and done our own
paperwork,
our own Enneagram through what's the test we took?
It's the whole identity. Well, you talk about the READY, RHETI. You got the scores off of the Enneagram Institute, and then you use those scores through his diagram that's on his website. Yeah.
And then so we did a diagram on his website, which is, I believe, unique to what he's doing. And then he basically read my mail and read your mail, which was quite hilarious and profoundly brilliant. But the thing is as he's breaking it down, and he's using the analogy of the airplane, which I love, and I think folks will get that. As he's breaking it down, there's a whole lot there. If you're fascinated by the Enneagram, you're actually going to be able to piece together a little bit of who you are as well. So
right, and it just brings a more holistic approach to it, and it doesn't drown out the other numbers, and they all play a role. And so if you've ever been in this place of like, well, I just don't get it, and I don't really relate to this number, or I relate really hard to this number, but I'm always scoring this one, and it just gives a place and space for all of it. I had you wrong. But it makes sense now, but I was wrong. I admit it. I was wrong.
Well, I listened and thought, this is right. Because before we got on, I told you, I don't know. I don't think I did this wrong again. I don't know. But as he broke it down, I went, man, now the best person to listen would be Karen, but I felt like he was reading my mail. This is honestly, We talked about his book, and I want to say it on the front end. The Brain-Based Enneagram is his book. We mentioned it on the front end. I know that he broke some of that down as we talked, but I just want to note it here. The Brain-Based Enneagram is available. You can find him. This is a quote that I never said to him, but it's certainly going to resonate. Pain cultivates faith. Faith creates possibility of a healthier future.
Good.
And I think that encapsulates some of our conversation as he shares his story, and is very present and very authentic and vulnerable as we progressed through the conversation. Also said he would come on again at some point, so I can't wait for that conversation. But I think this is going to really encourage and bless folks. In other news, do you want to make the announcements this time? I mean,
Well, we got the conference coming up. August 15th through the 17th. I always want to say the 18th because I'm staying a day longer, but it's through the 17th, and it's in Charlotte and North Carolina. And please get your tickets because they're running out.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure you get there. And if you're not able to get there, we do have an online live streaming ticket per se. So it's in the Rethinking God with Tacos Facebook group. If you're not a part of that, go find us, be a part of it. We want you there. It's a thriving community. I love it. It feels like church to me.
It is good. And if you also want to learn more, you can go to afamilystory.org as well. That's our ministry. Familystory.org is where you can learn about the conference. You can also sign up for our mailing list. That's where we'll keep you up to date on all the Zoom calls that we have and community connections that we do and books that are coming out. Brooke has a book coming out.
I do.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Okay. It just caught me off guard because I wrote it in like 2 days, and I had an idea and I didn't stop. I mean, I designed it, everything. I just didn't stop after it was done. And then talked to, is it TWS?
TWS, Robin
TWS,
Smith,
yeah. Publishing, and it's going to get published July 29th.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Well, and it's the culmination. You wrote it in 2 days, but it is the overflow of the journey that you've been on. And it's very helpful, probably more discipleship in its approach.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So, it's a 30-day, just really, it gives you an introduction of what the day is going to be about, what you're going to focus on. It gives you an exercise and then a reflection in it, and space to write for all the writers. So
yes. It's the path to wholeness.
Yeah, path to wholeness. It's so fun.
So
I'm excited about it.
And that'll be available at the conference.
Yes.
You can go to afamilystory.org at some point when we're ready and it's up. We'll make sure we highlight it there as well. But afamilystory.org is where you can sign up for the mailing list. It's also where you can give, and we're grateful when you do that. This is listener supported, and I'm honored. I'm honored that I get to do this. It's been life-giving. I get to do this with my friends and get to have conversations like the one we just had. Yeah, that are just they're transformative for me, and I think that there's some impact that's been made in others as well. So thankful when you partner with us that way. You can follow me on all the socials. It's at Jason Clark is my name, Jason Clark. On Facebook, as Brooke mentioned, we have a Facebook group, Rethinking God with Tacos. We also have an Instagram, Rethinking God with Tacos. I think I've hit all of the stops. Yeah.
Find us. If you're not there, come find us.
Like, share, review, retweet, tell your mom. We are so grateful. This is our conversation with Dr. Jerome Lubbe. Oh, and your last name is it Lubbe or Lubbe?
It's actually Lubbe. The vowels are all wrong. So honestly, man, being in the States for 30 years, I've never had it pronounced properly the first time ever, and I've never met another person with my last name. Yeah. So being an identical twin, you can call me Lubbe or twin or number one or Jerome. Honestly, I'll respond to it. I've been called a lot of things. So but Lubbe is the technical pronunciation.
Lubbe. Wonderful. I'm glad I asked after I hit record.
It's all good, man. I'm easy.
No, this is good. Dr. Jerome D. Lubbe is with us. Brooke and I. Thanks, Brooke, for sitting in. I'm excited about this conversation. I'd been introduced to you through a friend who's a huge Enneagram person, and also a huge Jesus person.
Yeah.
And said this is a really good connect. In fact, we have maybe a mutual connection through Paul Young, who I saw endorsed the book that we're going to talk a little bit about, the brain-based Enneagram.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very fortunate through no means of my own to be good friends with Paul, and I consider that a great blessing in my life, truly.
Oh man, you spend a minute in his presence and you feel the love.
Sorry, I think I just lost your audio.
I was going to say, I can't hear you.
Sorry. You guys hear me?
Pausing for technical difficulties. This will be edited out later. Or not, because it's real life.
Because it is real life, yeah. No.
It feels like the whisper. It's almost like God. It's like you think God's talking. It's almost there.
You're not quite sure. You're like,
get it.
just turn your head a little bit.
Is it me? Is it my conscience? Am I not positioned in the right way?
You guys got me?
Yes.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, Paul is one of those guys. You're in the room with him and you feel the love of God. You just feel the goodness of God. And
yeah, absolutely.
Grateful for him. And so the connection with you is one through friends, mutual friends. Spent some time getting to know you a little bit through your website. I know Brooke has done that as well. Fascinated by what it is you do. Mm-hmm. You're a through neuroplasticity. Are you a scientist? You're a doctor, I know.
Yeah.
And you're a South African. Share a little bit about yourself.
That's it. Yeah, happy to. I always joke with folks that some people say that they had a calling. I never had a calling. I had a dragging. Everything that happened to me was unsolicited. Right. So my high level story, which is either a failed B-roll kind of B-rate movie or it's true life, is I was born in a rural part of South Africa called Benoni to a Zimbabwean dad and a British-born but Zimbabwean-raised mom. My parents are both Zimbabwean. And we immigrated to the States in the early 90s on asylum status as refugees with $100, 2 suitcases, a bipolar grandmother, and a parrot from Kinshasa, Zaire at the time, to Knoxville, Tennessee. So the only thing that really stayed the same was that both of those start with a K. Yeah. But otherwise, everything was pretty different. I have an identical twin brother, an older brother, and we ended up going to 11 different schools before we graduated high school. Dad passed when I was a freshman in high school. I had my first migraine at 17. I've had over 2,500 in the last 25 years. Had, unfortunately, 8 head injuries, 5 of them because of other drivers who decided I was the best car to hit for the day, 3 of those drunk. So just had a very convoluted story of 8 years of getting our residency and our green cards and the nature of working full-time in my dad's foundry from the time that we were 8 years old, because he was a forge and a foundry worker who couldn't afford employees. So he had 3 boys that he made the deal that he would feed us if we worked for us, and we felt that was a fair trade. So it ended up like this just really all over the place story that my undergrad is actually in digital animation, special effects production. I did film, and then I went into music full-time with my brothers. And I started out as an artist, a creative who was finding my way after my dad passed. And long story short, man, after the music stopped overnight, because of a situation with the person who funded our entire journey. His wife's cancer came out of remission before you could drop somebody for pre-existing conditions. And he called us on a Saturday night when we had a song that was number 88 on Billboard, and we were one of the 25 artists to watch for in 2008, and said, hey, I need you guys to come home. I need the money on Monday for my wife's chemo. And everything stopped. Wow. And at 26, with 5 years of marriage under my belt and 4 years of raising someone else's teenager, my wife's younger brother, who we inherited when I was 21 and he was 12. We revisited the entire conversation and said, what's next? And the reality was I was a patient that was dealing with really complex things that no one knew how to support. And I said, in the sum total of everything that I've had in my life so far, the one thing that I need the most is answers on how to become more whole, how to become more healthy. So I went to school and decided to get a degree in healthcare and get lots of specialty board certifications in how to do what's called functional neurology. So I'm one of 10 doctors in the state, and about 350 in the world that are board certified in functional neurology, which is kind of like taking your traditional neurologist and putting them in a blender with a PT, OT, chiro, and saying, hey, can this really well-educated academic understanding of neurology be transferred into practical applications?
That's great.
And yeah, so the short answer that I tell people is I'm like a personal trainer for the brain. So if you want your brain to work better and you want to do it without drugs and surgery and you're still above ground, we can do work.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where in this journey, so I'm a right brain guy myself, an artist. Have a band story, did it for 7 years. Similar, the fellow that funded us also decided to change directions, but it was mostly because he's bipolar.
Sure.
But the long story short is we did the record, and then the tour fell apart, and after 7 years of chasing it down, we also, with a brand new baby and some decisions to be made. But a right brain guy, a creative, and I often say in a left brain world, right?
Yeah.
Doing that's, but we do Rethinking God with tacos. The tacos is so that we make sure to get the artist, make room for the artist at the table.
That's
but
great.
I'm curious about the faith journey. If there's a faith journey that correlates with what you were navigating as well.
Yeah.
And I'll say that because I'm fascinated by wholeness.
Yeah.
The conversation we're having is one. Brooks got a ministry called Path to Wholeness. So we're both fascinated by wholeness. By
I can appreciate that.
An understanding of, and a lot of times we do theology here, but it's all for the purpose of practical transformation of wholeness, of coming into a clarity of who he is, who we are, and living in a holistic way. So I'm curious about if there's a faith dynamic on this journey.
Yeah, there definitely is in that, Jason. I think I always joke with folks because levity neuters pain, right? That's the best way to make it through. Yeah. The reality is, for me, growing up in my entire history, the constants were always change, pain, grief, and God. Right. So the reality is we always had a new address. We were always dealing with the fear of whether or not we were going to be able to eat. Before my dad passed away, our best year as a household of 6 was $17,000. So knowing what it's like to land in a country with $100 and 2 suitcases and figure out how to make life work. The only thing that we had that was constant, the thing that got us out of South Africa, that got us out of Zaire, that got us stable in the U.S. was always what is the next connection with a church who is going to be able to give us the support that we need to survive the year, literally, from a housing standpoint to a financial standpoint to a resource standpoint. Yeah. So it's always been a part of that. But I think the same thing happened for me spiritually that happened clinically, that also happened in an Enneagram kind of space for the folks who know that I do that work, is I had a lot of questions. Yeah. Not a lot of people had either any answers or great answers. And when you're the curious kid who's like, but really? Like, is that it? And everybody's like, stop asking questions. And I go, I don't want to be in a room that doesn't let me ask questions, clinically, enneagrammatically, spiritually. What ended up happening in my entire space of every kind of container that I lived in was I said I don't want to find the right answer. I want to find an answer that shows up in a way that it demonstrates increased health, right? Like they'll know you by the fruit you bear, right? Like there's so many ways of going, do they know you by the fruit you bear? And I go, I see so much of what's happening in a spiritual context or a clinical context or other spaces. But man, these people don't feel healthy. They don't look healthy. But the theology feels very sound, and the practice and the orthopraxy looks good. But at the end of the day, I'm like, what does it look like to be a more healthy version of myself? Whole is another version of holy, and broken is not. Right. So the spiritual journey has always been very, very hardwired into a lot of brokenness. I got run over by a car when I was 8 because my twin brother is a terrible spotter. We were sharing a bike because when you're poor, you can only afford one bike. And we realized that was the first signs of ADHD for him. Okay. And then I'm the only person that I know that was run over by a car and then subsequently spanked by my dad for being run over by that car after he'd refused the ambulance because he wasn't sure if we were going to get deported if we went to the hospital. So all of these things, which sound again like a comedy of errors, put me into a situation where I had a lot that I was working through in my mind and my body and my heart and my spirit, and not a lot of support from an answer that moved me towards being more whole. So my entire journey has been, what does a healthier version of God look like? What does a healthier version of a parent look like? What does a healthier version of a doctor look like? Right. What does a healthier version of this thing called the Enneagram look like that actually moves me towards just being less broken, you know?
Come on. I get it, man. Come on. The search for wholeness.
Yeah.
All right. So you're talking to a novice. I early on, I would do the Enneagram the wrong way. I'd just tell my wife, "You tell me what I am."
Yeah,
because she was the first one that got into it, started reading, and you're not supposed to do it that way, I guess, but
you can. Right? It's like a car. Somebody can drive for you. Then you're just gonna have to suffer the consequences of that experience.
And I have since I jokingly say whatever the thing is, I'm the guy that takes it and promptly forgets what I am.
Yeah.
But let's break down the Enneagram for someone like me.
Yeah.
Because I think my understanding, of course, it's this: we're all in search of wholeness. Some of us less aware of it. Some of us operating in trauma. Some of us still navigating fractured ideas about God, and those things are limiting us. Yeah. But I think we're all pursuing wholeness. I refer to it I'm a relational theologian. That's how I refer to myself.
Yeah. So is Jesus. So.
Yeah, exactly. If my faith doesn't impact, if my relationship with God doesn't impact how I do my marriage, if it doesn't bring wholeness and transformation into my relationships with my kids and my friends, my neighbors, then we're doing theology wrong, and we're missing the point.
Yeah.
And so the Enneagram for me is one of those beautiful things that for me is about discovering who I am, but also in that there's the discovery of who God is. Am I getting?
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually, the funny thing is the very first time that I got introduced to the Enneagram about 14 years ago was the exact same time that I got introduced to this fella named Richard Rohr and in some other context, right? Because it was all the same time. Yeah. So lots of stuff has happened since that 14-year process. But I'm in the middle of doing a postgraduate course on neurochemistry, and through the lens of how the brain functionally works. Like, what does it mean to be depressed? What does it mean to be anxious? What's the difference between anxiety and panic, right? So I'm looking at all of this, and somebody introduces me to the Enneagram, and I haven't even seen a picture of it yet. I'm just hearing Richard Rohr talk about the idea of it, concept of it. And I said, man, this sounds, especially with the intelligence centers, this sounds a lot like the way the brain works, like the way human beings just operate as a normal person. And then I went, well, also at the same time, because I'm always thinking through that lens of what is an Imago Dei conversation? What does it mean to look like God? Come on. And I'm like, well, we have this whole concept of the Trinity, 3 parts in one, and we have this whole idea of a left brain, right brain, and everything that supports it from a subconscious standpoint. And I'm like, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but it feels like a lot of this is just a synonym for the other thing, right? There's so many kind of Trinitarian perspectives. Right. But what I didn't go into with a bias was, because I wasn't indoctrinated into the church of the Enneagram, is I didn't know anything about this thing called type. I knew about a whole brain. Like you joke around about being a right brain person, and I always tell everybody you can be more dominant in an area, but if you are a right brain person, what happened to the other half of the brain, right? Now, I have worked with patients who have had a hemispherectomy and they don't have the other half, but unless that's you, there's something happening on that other side. So from a high level perspective around the Enneagram, especially as it relates to God, the first question that came up for me when I was learning it was, if I'm made in the image of God, what number is God? And the answer is God doesn't have a type. God is all types. And if I'm made in the image of God, am I made in an aspect of God, or am I made in the complete image of God?
That's right.
So I didn't come into it with the you are a type perspective. Now, for the last 14 years, I've had lots of very dynamic conversations with folks about what type you are. But it's going into this perspective that if somebody's never heard of the Enneagram, really high level, Ennea just means 9 in Latin. Gram means a drawing, so it's a 9-pointed drawing. And in comparison to a lot of other personality type tests or inventories, the biggest difference with the Enneagram and kind of function is a lot of the other tests like DISC and Strength Finders and Myers-Briggs, they tell you what you do. They don't necessarily tell you why you do it. The reason people tend to gravitate towards the Enneagram a lot is it helps you understand your motivations. Like, what am I trying to do with this? But if somebody goes, okay, well, what's the easiest way to understand it? You can hold it up against the mirror of what God is, of going, can you tell a 6-year-old what the difference is between the Holy Spirit and God the Father, and the difference between those two and Jesus? Like, Jesus is this physical experience with God. The Holy Spirit is this non-verbal relational connection to God. And the Father is the one that's got a lot to say and a lot to educate and instruct and a lot of information. And the parenting style of the Father is different than the Holy Spirit. And Jesus didn't show up as a parent. So you got these 3 things that are helping you to feel in the Holy Spirit, think from the Father's perspective, and then what's your action? How do you do it? Like, what are you functionally, practically doing? So the Enneagram, really high level, is a structure and a format that allows you to go, what is my relative experience with thinking? That's a 5, 6, and 7. With feeling, that's a 2, 3, and 4. And then with doing or acting, which is an 8, 9, and 1. And then you can look at all 9 of those types and just step back and go, I just want to understand more about how I think, feel, and act in the world. And all of that information will help you to kind of assess what your version of those languages are.
I love that. So I did your test, your thing. I filled it all out.
That's awesome.
As soon as, when Jason was like, hey, do you want to do this podcast with me? I looked up your name and I saw Whole Identity. I said 100%. I didn't even read the rest of it. That was enough for me.
Cool.
And then I went and stalked your website for a minute just to read things. And this was really great, honestly, because I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, if you want to go by the numbers, right?
Sure.
But I related to a lot of other numbers a lot. And I understand the core motivation, and when people are trying to figure out their own process in the Enneagram, the one thing I really encourage them is like, what do you do when you're stressed? That kind of helps a little bit more. Like, how do you act? What do you do? Just to help give it a little bit more streamlined, because as an 8, you don't want to be controlled or betrayed. Well, I don't think anyone wants to be controlled or betrayed. So yes, the core motivation may be there, but I just try to give them tangible things to move towards something when you're stressed, and it's an easier one. But this, I really appreciated it because there's a lot of factors that I see in myself that didn't make sense as just an 8. I have a friend who thinks I'm a 4, and I laugh, because she just, in so many different ways. But I appreciate the wholeness of this, because God is all 9 numbers, right? And Absolutely. We are made in His image. And so just having just this example, I'm excited to read your book.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And that was one of the biggest goals for it was, you get into a setting with someone who is a faith leader, and you ask a hard question. And the reality is a faith leader can only give you what they have. A doctor can only give you what they have. A parent can only give you what they have. So if someone doesn't have an answer to your question, a really healthy person will go, I don't know. But we don't tend to live in a world where our leaders of any category, parental, spiritual, kind of clinical, are willing to go, nope, no idea, got nothing for you, because it's just not the normal kind of orientation to. I always joke with folks, humility and humiliation have the same root word for a reason. So if you want a leader with humility who doesn't have a healthy relationship with their own humiliation, they're probably going to end up with hubris, and that's a very different thing.
Come on.
So why I say that when you're talking about why I created the process is a part of it was looking at it honestly, Brooke, and going, what I've learned as a person who became a patient, who became a parent, who became a provider, like all of these things, was it's always, life is complex. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it is, if we don't honor the complexity of it, we're probably going to overcomplicate it. And one of the things that I was looking at in my kind of evolution of this understanding is if you look at it like fluencies, or you look at it like survival strategies, it's actually a lot easier to understand. Like my dad spoke 12 languages. He spoke 7 tribal languages: Shona, Ndebele, Xhosa, Swahili, Click. I mean, he spoke English, Afrikaans, French. It was crazy. And me, I'm a South African-born kid with Zimbabwean parents and British citizenship. I've got 4 passports. I'm an immigrant kid on a refugee status who's lived in 7 states and 5 countries. If somebody asks me where I'm from, what do I tell them? I can tell you Earth. I can tell you that much. I get at least this one. I got this one, right? So when somebody goes, I am a type, like really high level, when somebody goes, okay, well, make it make sense for something that I can connect to in a regular kind of metaphor. When you do like the RETI, the RHETI test on the Enneagram Institute, I think their 2 tests for your type and your instinct are the most comprehensive when you use the approach that allows you to see the whole map, the entire global experience of what it means to be a human. Really what you're looking at is pilots, co-pilots, flight attendants, and passengers. Everybody's on board. Everybody's got baggage. Whatever your top numbers are your pilots. If you're looking at it as an org chart, you've got your CEO, your C-suite, your mid-level managers, and your employees. If you're looking at a family, you've got parents, you've got older siblings and younger siblings, and then you got friends. It's just an organizational structure to let you go, hey, heads up, when you're talking about your type, you're talking about your CEO or your pilot. But very, very few, and I've done 1,500 profiles over the last 12 years, very few people have only one pilot. Very few people don't have a support piece that's so important to their story, but they forget it. Like if you have 2 pilots and then you have a couple of flight attendants, that's your flight crew. So if you know your 4 or 5 people who are actually your flight crew, you can know how you operate in the world. But then if you've got your lowest number, like this is another classic question, like if I'm made in the image of God, what number is God? Everybody's like, well, all of them. Well, then I guess I'm all 9 of them. Well, no, you have to have a type. Okay, but those 2 things don't work if one of them has to be wrong. And I doubt it's the Imago Dei piece, right? So but the other one was, what is my lowest number and why does that matter? And you can poll 1,000 people who are very well versed in the Enneagram, and maybe 5 of them will even know what their lowest number is, but 1 of them will know why that matters. And why it's important is if there's survival strategies, your top number, your flight crew, your CEO, is the thing that has demonstrated itself to be the most reliable to keep you alive. Not keep you healthy, but keep you alive. Your lowest number is not practiced as much because engaging in it is either going to hurt or no one's shown you how to practice a healthy version of that. So survival is keeping your high numbers in the forefront and keeping your low numbers in the background and going, hey, FYI, that passenger who's terrified to be on the plane and is trying to open the emergency hatch at 40,000 feet, if that person gets into the cockpit, you're going to have a lot of turbulence. So if somebody all of a sudden says, hey, your lowest number is a 5, we're going to sit and look at spreadsheets all day, and you realize that your stamina for that is about as long as hearing the statement, never mind having the experience. If you don't know what your low numbers are, you can get into a situation that will last 30 seconds and it will cost you 30 days worth of energy. So it's just some of these ideas of going, hey, I don't know a lot, but I feel like there's more to me than being a type. Because as a patient, the number of times that I got a diagnosis off of a single factor that was completely wrong because no one would look at me as a whole person. I'm like, man, we're way more complex. And if we're so beautifully and wonderfully made, I doubt God went, I think that person's just going to be very excitable and that's all that makes them the person. Or that person's going to be very melancholic and it's going to be their entire life trying to justify that they actually feel the depth of what it means to be connected relationally, and it hurts. Oh, but my entire life I'm just a moody person and that's it. I'm like, this is the dumbest set of information I've ever heard in my life. So a lot of it was just stepping back and going, can I ask a couple of questions about how everybody's doing on board? Because I feel like the pilot's got to be healthy, flight attendant's got to be healthy, passengers got to be not terrified, like you know, those sort of things of trying to just run a healthy family unit and seeing myself as the entire unit that's been made in the image of God, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
No. So much there. I love that metaphor. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I'm a writer, and so communication is where I spend a lot of my time, getting the language right. So, and this is why some of what we do here is so much fun for me, so fascinating, because we get to talk to folks who are well down the road of the area of their influence and where they've invested. And it brings new language and new nuance, because wholeness is the thing I'm pursuing. Even the way you say left and right, I use that analogy to say I'm a right brain guy in a left brain world, just to articulate the reality I'm in, knowing that, no, of course I've participated in left and right. I've had to navigate in the context of wholeness, but you are the first person. Here's what I didn't like the Enneagram, and I would always say, here's why. And I didn't like any personality tests, and people would go, well, you're probably the guy that I'm like, whatever personality doesn't like to take these, that's me. And I would always joke about it. But here was the real reason, and you just touched on it. In my area, sometimes people will talk about the fivefold of ministry. I don't know if you're familiar.
Absolutely.
And they'll
teachers,
tell
preachers,
you,
prophets.
Yes, exactly. And they'll tell you can be one or two. And I'm like, well, Jesus was all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And so the reality is, for me, I would always wrestle with that teaching, because it to me wasn't a holistic approach.
No.
And it would always get hierarchical, and it would always get segregated, and we would participate in separation. And next thing you know, you've got exclusion taking place in the church, and abuse is taking place. So I would constantly push back, and I'd be the guy in the room going, look, I can appreciate that there are graces on our lives for one of these five, but Jesus was all of them, and we've been invited into that fully human experience. And that was also what I would wrestle with when I would get into the Enneagram, because I would feel like, don't put me in one box. Like I don't want to live just over here. And so what you're talking about, I did the same thing last night. I took this, and I always joke that whenever I take the Enneagram, it's a different number every time, and I'm like, I'm doing it wrong. I'm just doing it wrong.
No, you're doing it.
Instead, I'm reading what you've worked on, and I'm discovering, oh no, I've been invited into a holistic approach to this that is, I've not heard this before, man. So I'm really excited about what you're talking about.
I love it.
I'm sure you can expand on it more. I've got a question, but I don't want to cut you off.
No. I'll go in your lead. I just want to honor what you're saying and tell you that I appreciate it, because both of my brothers are of the same perspective. Like my twin brother, I have an identical twin brother who's a riot. I'm laughing because I have an image of him. He lives in Spain now with his wife and 4 kids, and I have an image of him eating an ice cream cone that is 18 inches tall. And he's the guy who's sitting in the middle of the square eating an ice cream cone with a full gallon of ice cream in it, just because it's going to capture everybody's attention. He's that guy. But when he was asked what his Myers-Briggs was, he would always say STFU. And then whenever, and for anybody who doesn't know what that is, don't Google it, okay? But the other thing is, when somebody would ask him about the Enneagram, he would say a 911, because if you keep asking me questions, we're going to call him. You're going to need an ambulance. He's
funny.
Like, I hate. And then I start developing this process and helping him understand kind of who his flight crew is. And I'm like, yeah, you are what I call a sensationalist. You're not at all opposed to starting a fire, and that's just a great defense strategy, my man. Let's talk about it. So I appreciate where you're like, nah, I'm good. The safest way for me to live in this body is to learn less about this body. So I'm going to go ahead and say that that's probably wrong. But the phrase that I would give you, and then I'd love to hear your next question, is I always, in any context where people are very passionate, because the Enneagram is another place that it's the church of the Enneagram, and it's the holy mandala that is the Enneagram structure. I always tell people, when they're very, very committed to their belief system, that I don't believe what you're saying is incorrect. It may be incomplete. So being able to say, you can live a life and grow up in a one light, one stop sign town and have an amazing life, but most of us are going to have to travel. And most of us are going to have to learn how to speak a couple of sentences in Spanish in case you go on vacation and your daughter has an emergency appendectomy and you don't speak Spanish. I'm not saying that happened 4 weeks ago. I'm saying maybe it did. Like when you go to new places, it might be helpful to know a little bit of the language in a place that you haven't grown up in. And that's oftentimes the other types are just new languages that we haven't grown up around or spoken out loud as often. That's all.
No, it's beautiful. I love that. And I think to touch on the other thing that you'd said, there's what's the neuroplasticity?
Yeah.
All right, good. Yeah. I wanted to go that direction too.
So let's talk about the brain a little bit. Help me understand, because and this is also a theological construct that has been a lie that I push against occasionally, that we can't change.
Yeah, 100%.
And somehow, you can play the sin conscious game around that and keep people in bondage the rest of their lives as though you were born this certain way. It doesn't even add up, because all we do is change from the moment we enter this world.
Right.
But I would love for you to explain the scientific understanding around neuroplasticity and maybe how that applies to what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And I always find it fascinating when somebody's so committed to a perspective around communicating to someone that they're unhealthy or they're broken or they're restricted or whatever the case may be. One of the things, just to point to this, and then it'll connect to the neuroplasticity conversation. I always say to somebody, regardless of the context you're talking about, family, church, clinical, I always say to somebody, take what you were just told and ask yourself if it would sound different coming from a healthy parent, from a safe, healthy parent. I am not saying that you've had an encounter with a safe and healthy parent, but would a safe and healthy parent or a safe and healthy adult say that to you that way? And if they would modify it in any way, cool. I'm not saying what you said is wrong. I'm saying, can you frame it through the lens of a safe and healthy parent? Because if you can't, then it's probably not God. Wow. I'm not saying it's going to be comfortable, but I'm saying, is what you're saying sounding like a safe and healthy parent?
Come on.
Because God cannot be unsafe or unhealthy. So therefore, I got spanked for being run over by a car, by a dad who was terrified we were going to get deported because he felt unsafe, probably not the healthiest choice. Changed my relationship with discipline just a bit. Okay. So when we're talking about things like you can't change, I'm like, one, would a healthy parent say that to me? No. Two, help me understand why you believe that. Like what in Scripture shows you. I'll show you that you've got Legion, that you've got Job having a better latter half of his life than the former. You've got the guy on the cross who literally just said, I see you. And Jesus is like, that's good enough for me. I'm like, my man did not go through the 12-step process of reconciliation and redemption. I'm a little confused because you've given me a lot of steps right now. And the one dude, Jesus is like, hey, man, thumbs up. I'm good with that. That dude didn't even say, you the man. He just went, I recognize you. I see you. Jesus is like, thank you for seeing me. And I'm like, feels like the bar is kind of low. And we're overcomplicating things. I got questions. When we're talking about neuroplasticity, I think the first thing is there's got to be an acknowledgement that the type of thing that we're understanding about our capacity to change functionally, practically, is only about 15 years old, literally. Okay. Like the idea of the brain's capacity for change. So neuroplasticity is just the word neuro means brain, and plasticity means, or plastic means moldable or pliable, right? So if you've ever put something that's plastic that's not of the best quality in the dishwasher and you came out and it's in a different shape, plasticity, okay? It can change structure or shape. And the way that we function as human beings is anybody who's ever had kids, been around kids, seen kids on a video, knows that kids exist, knows that your 2-year-old thinks in a different way and feels in a different way than your 4-year-old or your 8-year-old or your 30-year-old. And sometimes when you're in a conversation with someone who's a significant other, I've been married 20 years, you can get triggered and revert into a less than mature version of yourself. Anybody who's ever had a complicated conversation with a friend or a loved one and they turned into the less controlled version of themselves, I call it hulking out. Right, Bruce Banner and the Hulk are the same person. They're just different in context. Okay, Bruce Banner and the Hulk are the same person. So anybody who's ever gone, wow, yeah, that didn't exactly go the way that I was hoping. I might want to, amend some of the things that I may have said or done. You had an experience where you changed. And then also at the same time, it's like, well, how do you reconcile not being able to change with the idea of the renewing of your mind and becoming a new creature and having all of these things evolve and change in who you are? So we step back from the can you change to technically 98% of what makes you a physical person will be rebuilt every 7 years. There's only about 2% of you that lasts as a cell, as a structural element of your body longer than 2 years.
Right.
So you are a new physical human being every 7 years, and you're turning over. I mean, you're reproducing your body. Thank God, because as somebody who's had a relationship with weight my entire life, I like the idea of knowing that I might be able to be a different weight a year or 2 or 10 from now. So yeah, change. Right. Neuroplasticity is just the idea of going, if I exercise a muscle and that muscle changes, or if I don't exercise a muscle and that muscle changes, what is my relationship with exercising my thoughts? And then I have a conversation around mental health. What is my relationship with exercising emotions? And now I've got a conversation around emotional health. What is my relationship with exercising and engaging my physical body? And now I've got a conversation with physical health. And again, you come back to that triad, that your brain manages your thoughts, your emotions, and your physiology. And you've got the Trinity that helps you with thoughts, emotions, and physical interactions in terms of how we can show up as the body of Christ and the reflection of God. And it's coming back to that idea that it's not that I can't change, it's that I might not know how to. And then the question is, who can I connect with that will provide a healthy avenue for me to become a healthier version of myself? So it's not about being less broken. It's about becoming more whole in comparison to who I currently am in this moment and who I've been in the past. That's it.
So good. God is love. His love is always good, as Jesus reveals. And we exist to grow sure today than we were yesterday, and sure tomorrow than we are today. And on August 15 through 17, we get to grow sure together. Guys, the Rethinking God with Tacos conference is quickly approaching. We're excited about all the ways in which we're going to connect to the heart of the Trinity and to each other. We're going to break bread together, or tacos, of course. I have great expectation for God encounters, people encounters, love encounters. Baxter Kruger will be there. Dove Alexander, Felicia Morell, Brooke Waters, Derek Turner, and myself will be hosting. I'll be speaking. We've got lots of friends coming, and we still have some spots available. So August 15 through 17, you can learn more about the conference or buy the tickets and come join us at afamilystory.org. Familystory.org. Really excited about this, our first conference, and I can't wait to see you there. That's so good. You got anything, Brooke?
Well, I was just going to say, like, the idea of neuroplasticity, is that what?
Yeah.
It's, I always think about, I think it might be from Strength Finders, where the superhighways and then like the gravel roads, like analogies in your brain and stuff. But I think about that in a way of, it's not permanent. Like, I may have a gravel road in my thought process somewhere, but my goal is to become more aware of it, to make it a superhighway, or to shift in it. One of the things that I really love to help people with, and I talk about, is their thought process and becoming aware of what they're thinking in the middle, like, of their thought process. Did you become aware of it when it happened?
Yeah.
After it happened, or before, and just changing your awareness level in that. Because
100%.
then also it's like your responsibility level changes. Not that you're not responsible ever, but there's just a different accountability in it. And that right there is the same. It's neuroplastic.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if I'm saying the word right, but it really is, because it's this idea that that you can change your thoughts, you can change what it is that you're doing, and people want to be stuck in like an addiction cycle. So I'm a crisis counselor, an addictions and recovery counselor, and within that, it's like when you get triggered into a cycle, then your mind, you just have a thought that you can't change it, and usually those cycles can last all day. You can make a decision at 6 a.m. and for something that you want to do at 7 o'clock that night. Yeah. But you can change your mind anywhere in that thought process.
100%.
You know, and that'll change your actions. But how we get stuck is thinking that we can't.
Yeah. And,
you know, and I just love that.
And I think why I start with what would a healthy adult, healthy parent say, even the idea of asking that question is going to be novel. You're doing something new. It's like when I was in Spain and we're having to do an emergency appendectomy with my daughter, I very quickly learned what muy tranquilo meant. Because everybody said, stay very calm. Right. And I'm a very calm person. Like when I specialize in complex, unresolved, catastrophic cases. I am the end of the road clinically for everybody that comes to see me. It is intense. I stay very calm. Yeah. But what ends up happening is, why I say that muy tranquilo is, the doctor was like, you got to stay calm. It's going to be okay. And at one point I got a translator to help, and I said, ask him if do I look calm or do I look upset? And he goes, oh no, you look very calm. I was like, then I probably don't have to have that feedback, but I hear that you've done that with a lot of other people. I actually, and they're like, but why are you so calm? I'm a doctor who specializes in catastrophic complex cases. This is scary, but I know what's going to happen next. Right. But when you're talking about, and this is also the benefit of like knowing that things can change. Your brain has a pattern of what neuroplasticity is. And it's trying to update the protocol to go neuroplasticity. And you're like, that's a new word. I learned a new word and I'm learning the new word. And is there grace to go, I'm a fully grown adult who's pretty sure I don't know how to say the word neuroplasticity. Yeah, because it's new. That's the way the brain works. If it is unpracticed, your brain will by default think that it is unhealthy and tell you something is wrong. It's not wrong. It's new, right? And then if you do something unfamiliar, every time we encounter something unfamiliar, our body and our brain is telling us, not asking us, it is unsafe. We are in danger. So think about every time we've come into an encounter, especially in the church, where somebody walks in and you're like, they ain't from around here. It's probably not a safe person. Don't approach, don't approach, don't approach. And you're like, you've never had a conversation with a person who looks or sounds like that. They're not unsafe. You just don't have a framework to have a conversation with a body who showed up that way, right? As a kid who appears to be the profile of a normal white American male who shows up in high schools and middle schools, my twin brother and I had to change high schools because the week after my dad died, Thanksgiving of '97, we got back to school and a group of kids at the school gave my twin brother and I a box of stamps to mail us back to Africa as our gift for coming back to school after we had buried our dad. Because we didn't fit the profile. They didn't know what to do. So what I'm saying that is you can have this perspective that things can't change and your chances of being unhealthy will go up. Hey, kind of like my battery saying, you're not plugged in. So let's change that. Now we're on charge. That wasn't complicated. So I just want to mention something to you quick as well. Two things. One, I'm going to show you something practically quick that somebody can go, well, how does my body immediately change in real time? And especially if you're doing work with somebody, Brooke, who's like, help me understand, how am I supposed to get in touch with an emotion? Like that sounds like voodoo hoodoo. That's one of them spiritual, hyper spiritual cult things you're listening. And you guys can understand when I get triggered, I start sounding a little bit country because that's where I grew up. All right. Like you land in Northeast Tennessee and people say you don't sound like you're from around here all of a sudden. I like it. So it comes out. But I'll show you something that physically can help somebody who's never had a conversation with their thoughts and emotions immediately start to manufacture language that goes, something's different right now in my body. I'll show you in a second. But the thing that I was going to mention spiritually, when people are like, well, give me an example, because I see it every day. I've had 5 people who are in their 70s get out of a wheelchair in the last 2 years, 6 and 8 years post-stroke. I've seen every single kid that I've worked with in the last 10 years who wants to speak, who is nonverbal, start speaking within 18 months. All of them.
That's awesome.
You can change. right? The brain can change. People can get out of wheelchairs. We see Jesus heal people. And I'm like, oh my God, the guy got up and walked and took his blanket, but we can't change. And I'm like, we're reading a different Bible. But probably the best example, I think, when you're talking about the people that you're working with, Brooke, is the gap between Jesus being like, nah, I'm good. I'm out. It's too much. He's in the garden having a conversation with his parents going, this is too much. And then all of a sudden he's like, but your will be done. Let's keep going. And my question to everybody is always, what did Jesus hear? What did God say between, I need this cup to pass, I'm exhausted, I actually need to be in a hospital. That's how bad I'm in. I'm physically in the shape that I need to be in a hospital. I'm dying, literally.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he's like, well, let's keep going. Like, what did God say to Jesus in that gap?
Yeah.
And the reality is God didn't say anything. The Holy Spirit gave Jesus an unadulterated experience of full presence, because a lot of times we equate silence to absence, and silence is not absence. Because if you think about it, as a parent, what could you possibly say to him in that moment that would make him feel better? Nothing. All you would do is patronize his experience. So what you offer is presence and silence and just connection and comfort. But in that moment, Jesus went from, I cannot do this, to, yeah, I'm good, and nothing was said.
Wow.
So to have that level of change, we, one, have to have safety. We have to have comfort and counseling and connection. But you have to be capable of change. My God, the guy wanted to die.
Right.
He wanted to give up. And then he's back onto the road healing an ear because one of his guys can't keep his knife in his pocket. I'm like, come on, man. So change is possible in Scripture. But let me show you something quick. If you put your hands together, like you're in the prayer position. Okay, so then you drop your hands in and you interlock your fingers. Okay, which thumb is on top? Hint, it's going to be either left or right. There's only two options.
You only have two.
You only have two. So which thumb is on top for you, Jason?
Left.
Left. And you, Brooke?
Left.
Okay, mine is also left. Some people who are listening or watching, if you post a video, will go, right, yeah, cool. That's the options we got. Unless you happen to have three thumbs, which is not out of the question. I have had it happen. I've had it happen one, or you're missing a finger. Okay. So now what I want you to do, this is your familiar position. This is your practice position. Okay. Put your hands back together and shift your right hand up and drop it into your hand and tell me what you feel immediately. So put your right hand on top of your left. Go ahead, Jason. He's still waiting for it.
He's like, what?
Yeah. So you had your left on top, right?
Yeah.
So switch and put all of your right fingers on top of your left fingers.
Okay.
So show me your hands for a second. Where's your right thumb, Jason?
On top.
Okay. So tell me what you feel. Like as soon as you did that, what you said awkward, Brooke, what else do you feel?
Yeah.
Well, because it's awkward and just this.
Yeah, you feel,
I don't have
feel
a word
the ick,
for it.
right? Yeah, exactly. You see how your body responded, right?
It's just it's like not
I had
right.
to think about it. It wasn't natural.
Yeah, it wasn't natural, right? And so is your right hand? Well, Jason's already given up. He's out.
He's like, I'm done.
That's okay. I'm joking.
Okay.
Sorry.
So you don't apologize. You're good. So and you see how you're trying to figure it out, right? So put your right hand back on top.
It is.
And it's almost like that gut feeling, right? That something's off. A lot of people will say wrong, weird, gross, uncomfortable. And now what I want you to do is just immediately go back to your familiar position and see what you immediately feel.
Like I'm right.
Like
I'm right.
I am right. Everybody always communicates their bias. It's not that this feels right. I've just communicated I am actually, in fact, as a being right. When you did it, Jason, what do you feel when you put your hand back in the familiar position?
I use the word safe.
Safe, yeah. So here's the thing. You guys have lived with your hands your whole life. Okay. All you did was change the orientation of your position. You go from, you see how my left is on top, and I switch the whole thing, and now my right is on top. I can go back and forth, and I switch. The other thing is try it a couple of times. Try and go back and forth with switching your hands.
Well, it's funny. I just sat down and I just put my hands down, and it went automatically into
the familiar practice position.
But what's funny is I always put my pinky underneath.
Yeah.
And I realized that. And I'm like, oh, I always do that though, but I don't think I ever paid attention to it.
No, because it's just practice.
Now.
It's just practice. But if you go back and forth, do it again a couple of times just for a few seconds and watch. I want to show you something. So as you're going back and forth, you see how you get a little bit more stoic, Brooke, and then Jason gets a little bit more excited. He's like, yeah. Because when we get triggered, When you do something like this and your body's trying to run a new protocol, it'll actually show you what your bias is when you feel unsafe. So the likelihood of you being a little bit more stern when you get unsafe, and Jason being a little bit more lighthearted, like, yeah, we're good. I don't feel great, but we're going to work it out. If you start practicing that, the other thing is you guys both stop breathing, right? Like Jason starts hyperventilating, like, and then Brooke's like, and then when you changed it, you went, and you took this huge deep breath. So I say that when you go back and forth like that, it's just a physical example of going, when things change and I do something new, my system was made by God, who knows a little bit more than me, to tell me something is different. And if something is different, is it wrong? Don't know yet. Got to figure that out. If it's unfamiliar, am I unsafe? Don't know. Got to figure that out. I need somebody in leadership to tell me, are we going to be okay? We've never done this before. So when you think about neuroplasticity and you think about change, every single time as human beings, even if you communicate that you enjoy change, people enjoy skydiving. It's not safe. It's life-giving, okay? Right. For them, it's life-giving. I did not have a great experience skydiving. My twin brother had a fantastic experience. It has been one of the greater mysteries of my life, okay? But what I'm saying is when you do something new, some people are energized by things being unsafe because they get an adrenaline rush and it's life-giving for it to be dangerous. Yeah. Some people are so allergic to an increase in their heart rate that doing new things feels unsafe because they get that adrenaline rush. Yeah. So when you're having conversations around what's possible to change, I think we have to start with the understanding and the truth that we can put our own hands in a different position in our own body on purpose and feel completely out of place. Yeah, so trying to have a conversation with a partner or a spouse or a child or someone about God might create a little bit more confusion than what we do with our own hands. Right?
That's good.
So it's just breathe, pause, do a couple of the finger interlock exercises and go, Jerome said to breathe, check in, and just see what it looks like to practice something new, practice something differently. Because good. Even the idea of permanency, the building I'm in is permanent. The road that I drove on here today is permanent. What would I need to change it? I just need a bigger tool. I need a different perspective. Even the roads are permanent. They can change. Permanency is a relative thing based on the tools and the perspective that you have.
That's good. I will say, I know that about myself, about going quiet, or you said stoic, and just because I become hyper focused then on what's going on.
Your vigilance just went up.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I've been like that ever since I was a kid. I could tell you all kinds of conversations that were going on in restaurants.
100%.
Because I was operating of hypervigilance for a long time.
If somebody does a finger lock exercise, I can immediately see what version of them was in their house at 8. Right?
That's good.
Because when they're 8 years old, they're like, did you guys hear that? Twig broke. Something's going to happen. Be aware. Danger. Somebody's coming. They're not necessarily safe. And then Jason's like, you know what's going to neuter this whole conversation and make it a lot better? I'm going to make everybody, hey, you don't want to eat me. Look at me. This is great. You don't want to fight this. I'm awesome. Yeah? No? Okay. I'm going to keep smiling while I'm trying to decide whether or not you're going to think I'm safe or not, because I'm not sure if you're safe. As soon as somebody starts doing the finger exercise, you can see an honest snapshot of what their bias is around their protocol to find safe again. Because it's not that you're unsafe. It's that your body is processing something so new, so different, so plastic, so changed that you don't have a protocol for it. So your body's gone, pause. What is our benchmark? What is our benchmark for what we do in order to feel safe? Do that first and we'll figure it out afterwards, because we might not have a second chance. We've never been here before. So it's just a chance to kind of catch your breath.
So
that's good.
It's basically where I would go with discomfort.
Yeah.
Is when I'm uncomfortable. That's true. When I'm uncomfortable, I lean in.
And I'd say that with the Enneagram, same with our conversations with God, most people nowadays, clinically, spiritually, enneagrammatically, don't actually know how to have a language of discomfort or how to work through discomfort. So we've ended up in a world where there's a lot of conflict avoidance, but not conflict transformation. And even conflict negotiation is good, but you have one winner and one loser. Jesus always, always, always did conflict transformation. He didn't do conflict negotiation.
No.
So when you're working through something uncomfortable, we're so biased, especially in kind of 21st century language, to try and make things easier.
Yes.
And the phrase that I would give is that we use in the clinic, it's written on the board, is if it's hard, it's helpful. If it's harmful, it's not. And so as soon as you feel something uncomfortable, you don't hit the eject button. You go, I mean, any parent who's ever tried to teach a child to drive, especially if you try to teach that child to drive a manual, which is my favorite way to drive. If you want to teach a human being how to drive a manual and you want to see which version of you two will show up when you are completely dysregulated, try to teach a teenager how to drive. Because my first kid is now 31 and I'm only 41. He's going to be 32 in a month. And I can tell you the 27-year-old version of me was a different version. Thank God for neuroplasticity, because I am not the same person I was when I was 27. So the next time I teach somebody to drive a car, and it will be a manual, I think it'll go a little bit smoother.
Now, you say it will be a manual, but then you get your girl in there and you think, you know what? I think we're going to go automatic today.
Yeah, but then I got to have the ability to change, right? Like that's my idea now. And you know what? Pivot, especially with my daughter. My daughter is a CEO. She's a 6-year-old who is going to run a country, even if she creates it on her own. So you're right. My daughter will probably get in the car and tell me how to drive stick shift properly, and the problem is she'll probably be right. So and I'm gonna have to figure out a way to go. Yeah. That's probably true.
I love it. Yeah, for me, I mean, we have a phrase in my house first. We have a lot of phrases. Scary is fun. I would say that all the time. And my wife would come along and go, sometimes.
Sometimes.
So you can see the two of us and how we navigate.
Yeah.
But I this podcast, Rethinking God with Tacos, for me, the whole point is, can we have a better thought about him today than we did yesterday? And I will often say that, and it's a joke, but I've gotten myself kicked out of a lot of places because my thoughts about God were better than the room could handle. Yeah. And so that discomfort is something I've leaned into, but it's also been greatly connected to trust. Yeah. For me, this is where I'm curious, because you started this journey because you had migraines. You've talked about people getting out of wheelchairs. I'm curious if there's a connection, and you talked about you being calm. For a while I was a family pastor. I jokingly say that a family pastor is a lesser for a large church, where I did a lot of triage. I'd meet with a group or a couple, and I'd meet with them once, and then I would hand them off to folks I trusted. And so I did the triage, and so I had to be in a room where I was way in over my head. The joke is that a family pastor does the same job as a therapist, but doesn't get paid nearly as much. Yeah, it's not true. I wasn't the therapist, but my point is that I found myself in those types of situations. Yeah, where I knew I could be the person with hope, that I was the calming force in the room, and that there was a God who saves, who transforms. There is an answer to this question. Even if I don't have it, I'm connected to the one who has it, and I can direct to folks. I love the idea that that people need to be in the room that actually have the grace and wisdom and experience and schooling and so on and so forth to be able to speak to the problem. But my question is, you're seeing physical transformations. I'm sure you're participating in emotional and the spiritual. It's a whole holistic approach to everything. You're the guy with the calm, but is there some part of? I want to ask you about trust. Yeah. Because for me, and back to Paul Young, I had Paul on at one point. We were talking. When he writes, he said this phrase, and I went, "Oh, that's it. That's everything that I'm into. Is trust is my through line." He said. Trust is when he's writing, it's the piece, it's the thought that pulls everything together. For me, it's, hey, God is trustworthy. Any flaw we have about him, I want to go after that, so you can't have connection where there isn't trust, and where he isn't always good, you can't trust him. Right. So it's like my burning passion, and I feel like what you're doing requires some secure attachment, some place of trust. And is there a connection there? Am I sparking any thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, this is the first thought that comes up for me in that, Jason, is I have a process that I use in the clinic with everybody that's called the 4 pillars of safety. Like every human being is trying to feel safe. And even when we don't feel safe with our own hands, we're trying to evaluate that.
Yeah.
And it's built first in touch, then in movement, then in connection, and then in choice. So if I want my 8-year-old to make a healthy choice, we have to have a healthy connection. If I want him to have a healthy connection, we have to be able to move towards each other in a way that's safe. And his willingness to move towards me is based on his relationship with touch and contact and how I'm going to come into contact with him. Wow. So if I don't offer safe touch, he won't move towards me. If we don't have safe movement, we won't build safe connection and trust, and then he can't make safe choices, right? Wow. Everything in our human experience is based off of touch, leading to movement, leading to connection, leading to choice. It's also the same way that the brain is built. Like our first relationship, before we even know we have hands and feet. Like the idea of being born broken is the dumbest theology on the planet, and I will argue it until I am blue in the face. You don't even have the part of your brain that deals with memory until you are 2.5. The hardware for memory is not even there until you are 2.5. So if you are born broken, someone has told you a lie and they were very unsafe, and I am sorry for that.
That's good.
The reality is my kids are figuring out how to walk before they even have choice. They don't even know that they have hands and feet. Never mind that they are broken, dirty rags, wasted on the planet, just trying to be less terrible. All right. So touch, we build, and then we move. Every mom in the 3rd trimester is not asked, how's the baby's hearing? They're asked, how's the baby moving? Right. Yeah. And then if you have touch and movement and you figure out how to operate this thing called the body, you start to connect to your brain and you go, oh, I can trust myself to move in this world. I can trust this person is not going to drop me when we walk across the road. And then I can start to make my own choices. So why I say that, when it's touch, movement, connection, and choice, when you talk about trust and you talk about connection, my experience with God in my life has been very, very different than a lot of other people who pursue the idea of God being safe, the idea of God being trustworthy. You're talking to somebody who's attempted suicide twice. Fortunately, it didn't work out. We're still having this conversation. You're talking about a person who hasn't had a headache-free or a migraine-free day in over 2.5 years. I normally average about 20 to 25 days a year where I don't have migraines or headaches. I haven't had one of those 0 days in 2.5 years. So I live in the body of a person who has the experience where I can see somebody get out of a wheelchair or somebody start talking while I'm actively in the middle of a migraine. I also tell people the perspective that you have with God is oftentimes rooted in your primary authority person. So if your parents were scary and your pastor was scary, God's probably going to be scary. You got to do your own work to unwind that and detach that. Right. So for me, when you talk about trust and connection, I think the biggest thing that I ended up, the choice that I made because I didn't have what felt like trust and safety and stability. I've had 27 addresses, and I went to 11 different schools. My fluency in stability is because things were so unstable that in order for me to survive, I had to find and desire. So from an Enneagram perspective, that means 6 is one of my pilots. My desire for stability and guarantees and security and trustworthiness. I'm a very stable person because I'm very practiced at being very unstable, right? I also, 6 is unfortunately the seat of anxiety. So I have a healthy relationship with anxiety because I'm really good at forecasting and thinking ahead. I'm also very good at not being able to stop forecasting and stop thinking ahead. Right. So in regards to your question, I think one of the things that I would say for anybody who's listening is if you have a safe connection with God or safe connection with people who can teach you who God is, your trust is going to be implicit. It will be there and you can make different choices. But if trust is not there for you and you don't feel safe and you don't feel connected, the ability to make a safe choice is going to be less likely. So then the thing is if you don't have choice because you don't have connection, the thing that builds connection is movement. It's being able to have self-control. So, and being able to have safe touch. So I say that is, for me, one of the things that's been the most powerful for me is I decided if I cannot experience or move towards a God that feels safe for me, or I can't make a choice and make a connection to move towards a faith-based body that feels safe for me, I can at minimum move away from the one that feels unsafe, to go outside of relationships that feel abusive for me. So what ended up happening is my journey of being more connected to God in safe ways was actually choosing not to stay in the context of relationships that consistently made me feel like something was wrong with me.
Good.
Like I got anointed in enough oil to bathe a cow. It never got rid of my migraines, right?
Yeah.
And the idea of being told that there must be something wrong with my spiritual life and something wrong with me for me to keep having migraines was abusive language.
Yes, absolutely.
So for me to be in a place where I'm like, I want to trust God, but the version of God that you keep giving me feels super unsafe.
That's good.
So when we're working on having and building trust, I think sometimes if you don't know how to move towards safer trust, moving away from unsafe spaces can by default actually give you the same amount of margin so that you can make a different choice.
That's so good.
Right? So in that space for me, I have gotten much healthier in my belief of what a relationship with God looks like by going, how can I take care of my body in a way that doesn't match what I've been told up to this point, but still produces a healthier version of me? Because to be honest, people, and even my kids, they're like, we joke around that my superpower is calm. And the reason my superpower is calm is the same reason that the Hulk in the second Avengers movie is like, hey man, we need you to do your thing right now. We need you to show up. We need you to get angry. And Mark Ruffalo turns around in the middle of the street and goes, you see, that's the thing. I'm always angry.
Yeah.
And then he hulks out because it's
always
available. So I say that when we're talking about trust and we're talking about what it means, why I love the Enneagram as a resource, especially through the lens of spiritual health and spiritual development, is it's one of the only models that will show you what version of you shows up if you're healthy or if you're mature, and which version of you shows up if you're unhealthy and immature. And the language that I would remind people is that I think there's a difference between healthy and unhealthy. I don't think that's the appropriate language, because if I hulk out and I lose control, I haven't become an unhealthy version of myself. I've become an immature version of myself. I've become a younger version of myself, and I can spontaneously mature again. So being able to go, what does a mature version of me look like if I know that my 3 pilots are 9, 6, and 2? My 9 helps me to stay calm and manage conflict. My 6 helps me to think ahead and make really good strategies. My 2 helps me to take care of other people and hopefully take care of myself. When those 3 spaces leading me as a person are mature, what does that look like? When they're immature, what does that look like? And then I can immediately go, I'm showing up immature because I feel unsafe. And then all of a sudden you can start to change the way that you show up, because there's nothing wrong with you. You're just practicing something new.
Yeah. I got some thoughts.
Go for it. I'm just taking it all in.
You said 2 things. I mean, you said a whole lot there, man.
Good news is you're recording it. So if anybody finds it interesting, they can rewind. If not, they've stopped listening at this point already, and that's okay too.
No, I don't think anyone stopped listening.
It's all good. The language around self-control is a big one. I have, my last book is titled Leaving and Finding Jesus.
Yeah.
And you just described essentially what I was chasing down was I'm far enough down the road that the mature Jason knows there's no shadow of turning in the nature of love. And so there's nothing that separates us from God, who is love, and a greater love that looks like Jesus, that you can trust, because it's a love that lays its life down for the other. And so because of that, I'm far enough down the road where I know that I was empowered to write Leaving and Finding Jesus, knowing that the Emmaus Road Jesus is walking beside everyone.
Yeah.
And so it's the invitation of what you're talking about, to step away from the fractures that have kept you in unsafe spaces. A whole lot of the folks listening to this podcast have traumas and abuses, and they have no desire to leave the love of God that has actually transformed them, that they've encountered in their kids and in their wives and in their own personal relationship with Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But have had to leave the institutions, the hierarchy structures, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, this dualistic mindset that fractures how we navigate life, and the poor theological constructs like you're born into total depravity, horrific things like this. Yeah. And so what you're speaking to is beautiful. It's my own journey, spiritual and otherwise, where the most transformation's taken place, where I knew God was good enough that I could stop reading. I stopped reading the Bible for years, and reset my lens on the Gospels, and that would have unnerved a whole lot of people around me. And yet I was able to navigate those roads and lean into that discomfort. Yeah. So I love what you're inviting folks into, because it's a whole lot of different language, but beautiful and profound what you're inviting us into. The second part, and I pin that if you want to speak to it, but the fact that that you're navigating these breakthroughs and revelation while still getting migraines is a unique thing that I've experienced in my own journey, where I'm like, man, I can walk into a room and I can see chains come off people and walk out of the room and still be living in that same wrestling match in my own, boy, God is good. That's where the I don't know, but he's good continues to spill over in my life. But man, I appreciate what you're sharing. If you had a thought, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I'm on the same page with you on all of that. I think it's to plug a good friend who's a great artist. There's a guy in Atlanta that I know really well. His name is Ross Boone, but when you say his name fast, it sounds like Raw Spoon. So his artist name is Raw Spoon. You can just look up rawspoon.com. But we have a painting in the office called I Make Me Believe, or I'm Trying to Believe, and it's the Help Me in My Unbelief conversation. Yeah. And I think, this is the benefit of being in a family with two brothers who are so dynamically different, and even an identical twin who's so similar and so different. Yeah. That I have a part of my business as an executive coach that takes care of a lot of people who are leading companies and trying to be healthy. Mm-hmm. And I get to be the one that goes, let me talk to you about your triggers and your traumas and help you find safety so that you can make better decisions. Yes. And then when you feel safe, I'm going to connect you with my older brother who runs an organization called Curiosity Coach. And he's going to help you find ways to be super inspired and excited, because I can't help you find ways to be excited when you're underwater and you are drowning. Telling somebody to be inspired while they're drowning is like throwing water on them. Yes. Not helpful. Okay. But once you're out of the water and you're dried off and you've recovered, I got a guy who's really good at curiosity. His highest number is 7. My lowest number is 7. We believe differently about access to excitement. Okay. Yeah. I have it. He lives in it. He's saturated in it. He's perfect. But why I say that, when you're talking about what you just shared, I think with Ross Boone, this painting is of this guy with his nose above water, and he's in a shirt and tie and suspenders, and he looks like he just fell overboard from a meeting on a cruise ship, right? And he's floating in the water, and a couple of just feet below him is an orca, and a couple of feet below that is a blue whale, but all the way at the bottom is the shipwreck. And what it is when you're drowning, there's that immediate danger that you sense, but then there's the bigger issue. But at the bottom of it, there's really real trauma. There's real things that everybody has gone through. Yeah. And anybody goes, oh, I don't have any trauma in my history, is either lying or in denial. Neither of them are safe strategies. Okay. Right. The body has been scared at times. Yeah. So in that space, I think there's the beauty of whoever's listening going, look, if you're in a place where you feel safe in your relationship with God, help other people feel safer.
So good.
Help other people find that kind of safety. Don't do anything that would disabuse somebody of the opportunity to experience the joy of what you are encountering, which is a safe version of God, right? And if you are not feeling that kind of safety, being able to connect to someone who improves your chances of feeling safe, not feeling better, feeling safe. That's it. Like we tell people at the clinic all the time, people do not come to me to feel good. They come to me to feel better, because when you come to me, I am not going to make you feel good. Everything that I'm going to do is going to be very difficult. You haven't felt your legs in 3 years. The process, hey, you ever had a leg fall asleep for like 30 minutes and it woke up? How did that feel? Yeah. Okay. Your legs have been asleep for 3 years. It's not going to be fun. You're going to hate me a lot, but you're not coming to me to feel good. You're coming to me to feel better, but their goals are different. But if somebody comes into me and they feel profoundly terrified, they are so unsafe. I cannot show up in a relationship with somebody who doesn't have trust and tell them something's wrong with them.
Right.
I have to be the version of Jesus that goes, oh, so you're saying you've tried everything? You talked to the guys that I trained, you did the whole thing, you've done it all, and it's still not working. And you're like, hey man, I did it. It's not an issue and a question of my belief. I'm still here. That's how much I believe. No evidence demonstrates that this is going to work, and I'm still here asking you for help. And Jesus is like, that's good enough for me. You know? So I think that's the big piece when you share what you just shared, Jason, is wherever you're at in the spectrum, if you feel safe, help other people feel safe. If you don't feel safe, find someone who will increase the chances of you feeling safe, and your likelihood of making healthier choices will drastically change.
Huge.
Yeah, I like that. And it's interesting because just even the way you worded all that brought me back to the beginning of our conversation about you starting your story at what happened when you were 8.
Yeah.
You know, and your whole life is you walking out the very thing you just said for encouraging others to do. And it's interesting because I don't remember what age you said you were when you saw the need, but you saw the need and you're like, I know there's a kingdom solution, so I'm going to keep asking questions. I'm going to keep doing this. And if I can't ask questions, I'm not supposed to be in that room, you know, and you just kept going and going, and you're still going and going. And I love that. That's great.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. It's I am fascinated by all. You've got 3. You're one of 3. You said.
Yeah, 1 of 3.
And you guys have all seemed to have been able to navigate into places of breakthrough.
Yeah.
And then even breakthrough that becomes others' breakthrough. Which to me is incredibly significant. I also a very different upbringing as far as my family structure, but I went to as many schools as there were grades almost, and bounced. I lived in bounced all over the place, and so had to re-figure out how to fit all along the way. But I brought it up because I think about the relationship I had with my brother and the fact that we shared a room and the way that we connect to each other now. It's fun to hear. Apparently I'm a 7. Last night I was a 7, 5, 7, something. I don't.
Yeah, I would have bet every clinical license that I have that was going to be right up there at the top. But I can't tell you who you are. But the jury was out for a few minutes on that one.
My wife thought I was a 4 or 5, but anyway.
Well, what's your 4 and 5 score? Do you have your tests by the chance?
I thought he was a 4 too.
I do. I'm a 7. This last one last night was 7.295.
Yeah. So 7 scored what? What's the score on a 7?
Oh, the number?
Yeah. So you'll have the stat because you took the ready, and I'll do yours as well,
last
Brooke.
night.
But you did
7 was at 20. 7 was 21. Is that?
Yeah, that's a pilot.
That's a pilot.
What's the next one?
2 is a helper. That's 20.
That's a pilot.
9 was a peacemaker. 19, and then 5
flight attendant
was a 19 as well.
Flight attendant. Okay, where's your 4?
My 4 is way down. This is the first time. It's like 15.
Yeah, that's a first class passenger. That's not way down. Yeah. What's your lowest number?
My lowest number is the last one, the loyalist, 6, 7.
And it scored a 7.
Scored a 7.
Yeah, that's the one that if if that one gets into the cockpit, there is turbulence.
So walk me through that real quick.
Well, do you have anything that's 10 or lower? 10 points scored 10 or lower, so 6 scored a 7. Okay, and I'll explain this to anybody who's listening in a second.
7. Okay.
10 and 7. What scored a 10?
The reformer, 1.
Yeah, so 1. Okay. So here's the thing. When you look at the orientation as an organizational chart, like leadership, you've got lead, support, and follow. Okay. Your flight attendants and your first class passengers are your supporters. Your leaders are anybody who's 20 or higher. Okay. But when you've got 2 19s and 2 pilots that are 20 and a 21, they're only separated collectively by 2 points.
Right.
So an example of when somebody's going, okay, don't go too much into the weeds with the data. I won't. Don't worry. The reality is, even if you score, I've done 1,500 profiles. There's only 5 people that have ever scored over a 30, and all of them were sevens, okay? Because sevens are gas pedals. So they can hit the highest volume, eights to threes to. The 7, 8s, and 3s are gas pedals. The only person who will score higher, 30 or higher, is a 7, an 8, or 3. If anybody has ever taken a ready and scored higher than 30 on something other than 7, 8, or 3, for the love of God, send me an email. You're a unicorn, okay? I want to meet you. But basically, when you're looking at these numbers, 21 out of 144, because you have 144 total points. 21, I think, is 14%. Let me see here quick. So if I do 21 divided by 144, that's 14.6%. So when you say you are a 7, you are talking about 14.5% of your identity. There is 85% of who you are as a person in the other numbers.
Love that.
Right? Even if you score 30, which has only happened 5 times out of 1,500, it still only accounts for 19% of who you are.
Right.
So you have an 80% chance that the other numbers make up the rest of your identity. Okay?
Right.
So what that means is if you've got those top 4, is there anything between 19? Your 5 is a... You said your 4 is a 15, right? There's nothing between 15 and 19?
Then I have 3 is 16.
So 3 is even higher. Yeah.
Type 4 is 15.
Yep.
And then the two bottom ones, type 1 is 10 and type 6 is 7.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So here's a way to kind of orient to that. Your flight crew is those top 4 numbers, which are 7, 2, 9, and
5.
5. Okay. So 7 is, when you've got all 4 of those within 2, it's kind of like a quartet. It's like a band that's all singing so close that it's not like a lead vocalist and a harmony vocalist. It's pretty darn close. It's more of a quartet, okay?
I got you.
Which means that you can as easily shift from going, hey, we're going to do some conflict resolution and peacemaking and dream, that's 9, to, hey, let's find a way to inspire you and do it in really dynamic and exciting and entertaining ways, that's 7. Right. Or it's like, hey, I really want to take care of you. How can I serve you? How can I advocate for you? How can I steward this thing and move it forward? But you as a person matter more than the idea. That's 2. Yeah. And then 5 is saying, hey, it's great for us to have a conversation about like who you are and where the conflict is and like being excited and moving forward. But we also need to ask some really hard questions and set some boundaries and be able to say no. Right. If you don't have 5 in you, 7, 9, and 2 do not know how to say no. Those 3 numbers are not no spaces, okay? Right. 5 is the seed of no. So when you have all of that together, it's like if you put it into a sentence and does it go 5, 2, 5, 9, 2, 7?
5, 9, 2, 7, or yes.
Okay. So
7, 2, 9, 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So 7, 2, 9, 5. So if you do it in reverse, you can actually make like a mission statement or a purpose statement. Like my statement with my top 3 numbers of 9, 6, and 2, 2, 6, 9, 2, because they rotate depending on the year and what I'm going through. Because I'm seeking a lot more rest this year than I have previously, and I'm taking care of less people. So my 2 and my 9 switch places. Are all in the cockpit, but the 9 is now my lead pilot, and the 2 is a co-pilot. But when you put all 4 of those numbers together, you can say, look, if I ask clarifying questions in 5, I can find a way to bring peace to the conversation in 9 in a way that allows you to feel unconditionally loved in 2 so that you can realize that you are a beautifully, wonderfully made thing that's worth celebrating. Like all 4 of those things together is I want to clarify ways to peacefully love you into a space where you are celebrated and a joy, right? That's what you do as a parent, it's what you do as a pastor, but you need all 4 of those numbers together to go, yeah, I can't just have a great time without asking questions. Right. I can't have a great time and do it by myself. Like 7 energy, when they're real high, they're like, wait, nobody else is with me? It's cool. I'll do this guy. Solo skydive's fine with me. I don't need a tandem. You're a tandem skydiver. You're like, I don't want to skydive alone. That's boring, right? Because 7 and 2 together need other people. Right. 7 by itself don't need anybody else. Right.
Wow.
So all 4 of those things. But when you look at the bottom 2 numbers of 6 and 1, all of these are also stamina pieces. Like you would have to exercise restraint not to show up in those top 4 numbers regularly. They're your default languages. They're the dialects you speak without even trying. You wake up in the middle of the night inspired, right? Because it's happening to you while you're asleep. Right. But 6 and 1, 6 is a seat of commitment. It's a seat of guarantees. It's a seat of forecasting. It's a seat of thinking years and decades ahead.
Right.
The 1 is also the practical implementation and execution. Like 5 is ideation, 1 is execution. 5 is the judge, 1 is the executioner. Okay. Yeah. So you going, I got an idea, especially in 7. Now you're like, I got an idea. 7 and 5 together. Yeah, we got lots of ideas. I got lots of ideas. And then the 1 is like, so what are we doing? You're like, shut up, go back into the bathroom. Right. But there's a way we've got to think about doing it. Like, what's the plan? 6 is in the back going, I don't know, I have a plan. 1's in the back going, I don't know what I'm doing. Right. So when you got lows 6 and 1, both of those are responsibility stances that go, if we don't think ahead about the action items, what are we doing? So if I put you into a room that said, hey, FYI, Jason, I need you to tone down the enthusiasm. I need you to stop trying to make peace. I need you to do the hard work of getting real uncomfortable. And I want you to tell me exactly, step by step, how you're going to make this work over the next 3 years. You're like, I left the room. Halfway through your conversation, I left the room. You're like, I'm out. That's not my thing. I'll hire somebody for that. Right? Yeah. I got somebody, the strategist, execution person, implementation. I know people. So when you've got this whole thing, okay, I don't know if any of this is landing, but the fact that you guys are laughing feels like we're close. Okay, lots of practice. Yeah. But what ends up happening is the thing that I actually communicate to people with this process that can be so helpful is your highest numbers exist because either you have had unsafe experiences that you could not avoid and you had to learn how to speak that language in order to survive. Right. You had to stay in it because there was no way out. Or you had really healthy examples of it and really healthy experiences of it, and you're like, I want to reinforce that. So either unsafe and you had to reframe it, or safe and you wanted to reinforce it, but it stayed high because you had to speak that language or you wanted to speak that language. Right. The choice was made for you or you made the choice, so you're high in it. Your lowest numbers have a lack of life-giving encounters. There are either not enough examples for it to be a safe and approachable strategy or language to speak, or you legitimately have unsafe experiences around it and you chose not to speak it because being that version of a person feels too unsafe. Wow. So when you look at all of that, it's like if you take everything away from your results and go, what would it look like for me to actively, intentionally, once a day, tell myself, hey, those top 4 numbers, the chances are high that I'm probably going a little faster and a little harder than I need to because I think I need them so badly that maybe I just adjust my speed by 3 to 5 miles an hour. Keep going, but change my speed. Right. And then the lowest numbers, it's like, man, I haven't engaged in that in a long time. What would it look like to just consider even having a conversation in that space? Just the idea of it is hard. Yeah. But, you know, asking myself, especially as a 5 or somebody who's got 5 as a pilot, right? Right. Why does 1 and 6 feel so unapproachable? Right. And why, if somebody interferes with my top 4 numbers, do I become a less healthy version of myself or a less mature version of myself? Because if somebody interferes with your top 4 numbers, you will change how you show up. If somebody introduces the bottom numbers, you will change how you show up. So it just gives you some of that idea of who's a pilot, who's a flight attendant. But for the 4 piece, coming back to that, to do the callback and do full circle, your 4 and your 3 are pivot points. Like you got this seesaw of the top 4 numbers are high and the bottom 2 numbers are low. Yeah. But those other numbers in the middle, around 15, 16, they're pivots. Yeah. So if you have a safe encounter with that, it's a rising tide lifts all ships. So what 3 and 4 are doing is saying, hey, 3 wants to create an authentic experience in 4. And 4 is saying, I want to hear the heartbeat of where you're actually hurting. It's not my place to stay there with you as a counselor, but man, if I can properly create an avenue for you to be heard and seen and known and loved, I'm going to hand that off to somebody really effectively. So being a family pastor versus being a counselor for somebody with your orientation, not a bad option. Right. But if you feel yourself succeed and you were able to get to a depth of emotional connection that wasn't so deep that you felt like you were going to drown, but you got properly wet, but you were able to get back out and dry off in time before you actually, suffocated in the pressure of that encounter. Yeah. You're like, wow, that was really, really good. But 3 and 4 are a timing piece because you got on the plane, you had the flight, and you left. Your flight crew, they're doing 3, 4, 5 legs a day. They're flying nonstop. But your first class passengers, they enjoy flying, but they don't stay on the plane. Your lower passengers, they're just trying to survive the flight. Right. So it's like looking at all of those things and going, my lifetime of experiences has told me if I speak the language of 7, 9, 2, and 5, my chances of survival go up. If I speak the language of 1 and 6, I don't have as much evidence that that's going to end well for me, and there's an opportunity for me to change that experience. But I have to do it really intentionally, and I'm probably, because I don't speak the language, I'm probably going to need a translator or a tool that allows me to understand when someone speaks that language to me, so it doesn't feel like something's wrong, because that's not my natural fluency.
Yeah, that's Brooke. Partly why we're laughing. My gosh, brother. I mean, a few things. I think I believe in the Enneagram.
That's great.
Second, so this is obviously I'm speaking with someone who's mastered how to interpret this.
Yeah.
Is this the first step that you? I guess first, before I ask that, how much do I owe you? Thank you.
You're welcome.
You get into a room with someone, and is this the first step for you before you begin to? This is the map to help you rewire and help people begin to. And where would you start? Do you start at the bottom with someone?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually, the first thing that I do with folks is we use the process of you have to understand yourself in order to take care of yourself, and be careful of taking care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself. Step one is understand yourself. Step two is take care of yourself.
First,
yeah,
if we're going to stay in the plane.
You can't give somebody something you don't have. Parents are like, I just want to be calm with my kids. I don't want them. I want them to stop being angry. I'm like, are you calm and not angry? Because if you can't give them what you don't have. Okay.
It's good.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it's just the permission to understand yourself better. So I recommend taking the 2 tests on the Enneagram Institute. The way I explain or recommend for folks to take it is don't take it based on who you have been or who you want to be. Take it based on someone saying, what is it like being on the other side of you, and how do you most regularly show up right now? Because you're not the same person that you were last week or last year or last decade. So when you take the test, try to answer it based on who you are at the moment, because those are the protocols that are running in your system. That's the not who you want to be or who you have been. Who are you right now? Especially if someone knows you really well and they're answering for you. The challenge in the questions is there are questions where one of them is so wrong, you're like, well, that's easy. Or one of them is so right, and you're like, yep, got it. The challenge is when both of them feel equally unsafe, or you don't want to be either answer, or both of them are like, I need to be both of those things. That's 2 yeses or 2 nos. Okay.
I was annoyed last night several times. I'm like, these are both wrong.
These are both wrong. You were enthusiastic. That's your 7 and 5 going, I'm adamant that this is incorrect.
That's true.
7's like, whatever, I just stopped taking the test. But your 5's got enough in there, they're like, we're going to find the right answer. I don't know what I'm going to do with it because my 1 is low.
I'm talking to this guy tomorrow. I got to get this test done. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think what I tell people is when you get stuck on something that feels like 2 nos or 2 yeses, 1, because you're looking at a whole identity profile, if you answer a question, 10 questions, okay, you're talking less than 8% of your total identity is going to get skewed. It's not going to be a lot. It's less than 5, actually, if you have 7 questions. So don't stress over the ones that feel really similar. Always, you get a really good orientation. It's like the whole identity profile is like having a population census for the entire planet or the entire global experience of who you are. We're talking small percentage differences. Right. But for somebody who's like, no, I want to answer the questions as effectively as possible. Cool. What you do is take both of the answers, put them on signposts at a fork in the road, and say, if someone was trying to find me, which of these answers would lead them to me faster?
It's good.
That's the one that you choose. It'll get you a little bit more honest, a little bit more accurate. But yeah, take both of the tests, figure out what's high, what's low, what's kind of the results. And then on my website on drjerome.com, my clinical site is Thrive Human Care, but my content site is drjerome.com. We posted the all 9 e-course for free, where it's like the expressions of what version of me shows up if I'm high in a number or low in a number. So being able to go, I don't know this language. Can you talk to me slower? Can you talk to me where I can hit pause and I can understand one thing at a time? Yeah, all the videos are free on the website. So take the tests, watch those videos, and then the last thing that I would say, step 1, take the test. Step 2, watch the videos. Step 3, whatever your highest numbers are, anything that is a 17 or higher, sorry, is really a 16 or higher. Anything that's a 16 or higher, if you go onto the Enneagram Institute under Learn and under Type Descriptions, and you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's going to be a section called Personal Growth Recommendations. The PGR, the Personal Growth Recommendation, is a cheat sheet for what you can immediately do that will make a big impact. And the recommendation that I give to people is when you read those paragraphs, there's going to be something that jumps out to you. It's called the Holy Spirit. You're going to have something that's going to jump out to you, and it's going to go, hey, heads up, that's it. That's what we're talking about. You know it because it stood out like a billboard, and it came all the way off the page, and it waved at you and said, can we do that once this year? If you look at your personal growth recommendations for your top numbers, whatever your flight crew is a 16 or higher in your scores. Okay. So whatever type scored 16 or higher is a flight crew. If you look at and cherry pick and go for the low hanging fruit, y'all, life is already difficult. Yes. If you pick a personal growth recommendation and you're like, well, do I need to do the right exercise? When's the last time you were in the gym? What's a gym? Go to a gym. Okay? So when you pick a personal growth recommendation, just pick something that you're like, that feels so relevant that I actually want to do it, and I know I haven't been. That will get me in the process.
Good.
So take the tests, watch the videos, figure out what your numbers are that score 16 or higher, go to those type descriptions and just browse the personal growth recommendations and pick something off of there that the Holy Spirit leads you to say, hey, if we could do that at some point in the next 90 days, I think it would make a difference. Yeah. And then as you start to learn more about it, it'll be like learning a new language. No one's fluent. Learn the alphabet. Just pick a letter or two and you'll get on the way.
Come on.
That's really good.
Here will I sing. Oh, oh, oh. Hey guys, interrupting for a second. Glad you're here. So thankful for this podcast. Thankful to get to do this with friends. Thankful for Derek and all of those who've navigated it with us. Listen, this podcast is done under our nonprofit, A Family Story. 12 years ago, I had a vision and I wrote it down. I'm going to read it to you. Family Story is a relational community of creatives, family and friends. I see all of us as creatives. We do life together. We envision and express God's love through our gifting and grace. We are worshipers, dreamers, storytellers, and preachers, a family of dads and moms, brothers and sisters, daughters and sons, united by a passion to know and reveal God's perfect love. I feel like I'm seeing the fulfillment of some of that vision 12 years ago. The mandate on A Family Story was to create media content catalytic for an encounter with the love of God. afamilystory.org is our website. I encourage you to go there. There's a whole lot of media content there. There's books and articles. There's films, some music, and this podcast. That's the home of Rethinking God with Tacos, which is pretty dang cool. It's been life-giving, as I said, the community around it, the community of creatives, of family and friends that's growing. It's blown me away. And so I'm thankful. I'm thankful for all the relationships, connections, and I'm thankful for all those who've given. Rethinking God with Tacos is listener-supported. If you'd like to support us, you can go to afamilystory.org. Again, we're a nonprofit. And I would encourage you to join us on our Facebook group. Follow us on Instagram, all the socials. If you're curious how to find me on the socials, it's at Jason Clark is. Otherwise, like, share, write a review on iTunes or Spotify. Tell your mom. We really are loving doing this, and I'm so thankful for everyone here. All right, it's time to get back to the podcast.
Brooke, do you want me to tell you yours quick, or are you good?
Oh no,
I was going to say, did you want to do it?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's people like, is this like neurotheological tarot? And I was like, no, it's just the way the brain works. I understand how the brain works. So it's
well, I just love hearing it, even because that makes more sense to me. The approach that you have, it makes a lot more sense to me, instead of it just being, because I know people have really just used these things as weapons.
Oh yeah.
And
heavily
to
weaponized
either pigeonhole people or tell you who you are and all about you. but I like the approach that it just makes more sense to me.
100%.
And so
before I forget, because I want to hear this, Brooke, like an example of not weaponizing it, because people will weaponize 7 a lot, Jason, and go, you're the flighty, FOMO, unreliable, scattered person. Yeah, if you look at just an immature 7, yes, my 6-year-old is like that because he's freaking 6. Right. It's supposed to be like that. The 7 is a seat of childlike wonder. The reason that they're not so committed to something is because they're carefree. I'm sorry that your life is so burdened that 7 has been something that died in you. Let's work on that. But don't be mad at me that I still think that the world is wonderful, right?
That's great.
The other thing is also the 7 is has the highest capacity to model the prodigal father out of any number. There is no number that models the prodigal father better than 7. So if you look at each number and you go, what someone has told me that there's something wrong with me, you can find a scriptural reference of that particular energy being modeled as a version of God. And the prodigal father is the best example of 7.
You just gave me the best compliment, man.
Yeah. So
that's in my heart. And
that's great.
And Brooke, before you read Brooke's tarot cards, however you said it.
Neurotheological tarot.
Yes, theological tarot. Before you do this, Brooke and I connected because she basically reached out and I'd said to my wife, I do not need any more spiritual. I do not need any more supernatural strategies, no prophetic strategies. I've got enough of those. I need help implementing. And then Brooke called and said, hey, by the way, my skill set is implementing. And I went, oh my God, thank you, Brooke. So that's partly why we're laughing.
That's awesome. And the Lord doth provide.
Yes.
So what you got, Brooke? What's your set?
My first one is 8.
Mm-hmm.
My score is a 27.
Cool. That's high. That's good.
5 scores 21.
Yeah, so y'all will get in long conversations.
2, 19.
Cool.
3 scores 16.
What was your 5 again? A 20?
21.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. So those are my top 4.
Yeah. So
and
8,
then
5, 2, and then
8, 5, 2, 3.
Got it.
Okay. And then 1 scored a 15.
Mm-hmm.
7 scored a 14. My 6 and a 4 scored 11.
Cool.
9 scored a 10.
Cool. So you don't have anything that's under 10, but those 2 that are 10, 11, 2 11s?
2 11s, yeah.
Okay. And that's 9.
9, 4, 6.
Okay.
And then 7 is 14.
Cool. So there's a gap. So your 14 and 15 are your first class passengers. The ones that scored 11 and 10 are coach. They're in the back. They don't get the free drinks. They're just trying to. Yeah, they're flying economy there.
That makes sense to me.
Well, and the reality is also because everything in the body is economy. Like whatever your highest numbers are your highest pay grade. Your body's going to allocate the most amount of resources to that perspective because it gives you the highest chance of survival. You're going to budget the least in terms of how you show up in the world. But this is the interesting thing. Whatever your lowest number is the voice of your inner critic. I guarantee it. There's a lot of evidence over the last 10 years of doing this work, but when whatever your lowest number is, like for the last 8 years, you all know what my lowest 2 numbers are? Like everyone's like, oh, it can't be true. I'm like, it is true. I have 10 years of data and a lot of life experiences. But when I talk, what do I sound like from an Enneagram perspective?
What do you sound like?
Yeah, you would know maybe better, Brooke, but what do I sound like? Most people think I'm a what?
A 3.
A 3 in terms of like, why a 3?
Well, I think of just the go-getter aspect and you learning and doing all the things and just like, I'm going to make this done. I mean, that's kind of what your life,
right?
Yeah.
What would be another pilot? Something that's like, well, the way he talks and what he talks about must make him high in
5.
Yeah. Everybody always thinks I'm high in 5 because I do neuroscience.
Right.
5 for the last 10 years has been my lowest number for my entire life.
Okay.
This time that I took the test a week ago is the first time my 5 has come out from a sub 10, right, ever. And it's because I've done a lot of work on it. And primarily it's because 5 is the seat of no. And I don't have access to a no. I've built an entire clinic around, I'm not great at saying no, so I'm just less available to say yes. That's another way of saying no, right? But my inner critic for 4 and 5 is that I didn't even get my own womb. Like I got my first bed by myself at 11. So the idea of being an individual in 4 as an identical twin is a foreign concept. I've never even had my own birthday. But 5, I'm convinced that I'm an idiot until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon when there's enough evidence to prove that I'm not. Because so much of my life before I became educated in this topic convinced me from the people that I came into contact with was that I was stupid. Something is wrong with me, not from my family of origin, but from spiritual and then kind of community, right? So why I say that is whatever your lowest numbers are the ones that are actually the highest internal dialogue. The highest numbers are your highest external dialogue. So what you're saying to yourself is very different than what you're saying to other people. And there's a lot of attachment stuff and a lot of, Freudian components in that. But high level, your top 4 again, just it's
8, 5, 2, 3.
8, 5, 2, 3. So the thing that's interesting about that is 8 and 3 are both gas pedals. 5 is a brake pedal and 2 is a throttle. But with 8 being that high, and 3 being able to complement that as a flight attendant, your chances of picking up speed are different than somebody who might be high in 9 and 4, for instance. So your 2 of your bottom numbers are 9 and where'd your 4 fall, by the way?
11.
Yeah. So those are both brake pedals. So being able to slow down in comparison to being able to speed up, there's a contrast in your motivations, right? So when 9 and 4 are lower, this is also the interesting thing. People will give what they need. So when somebody's like, well, you gotta be 4. You're like, no. I desire that so much. I've created it for people outside of myself. So when you're low in 9 and 4, you can slow down and listen to someone else's pain on purpose. But how long will it take if somebody goes, hey, can we pause? Stop everything that we're doing, and I just want to listen to everything that is breaking your heart at the moment. And I want you to share that with me for you personally. It's such a high desire when you're low in 9 and 4, but it's a low practice because there's not as much experience about making that about you in a safe way. So for you to slow completely down, turn everything in the world off, and just communicate what hurts in your heart has to be a very safe environment because the lowest numbers are very vulnerable. Right. So you gotta have a different container. If somebody asks you to slow down, they better build the container because it's not your natural propensity. Right. If slow down and think is different than slow down and slow down. Okay. Because when 5 is high, you can drop in and think ad nauseum. That's not the same thing as your physical body going. What, I'm going to do this for another 7 minutes. Can you last? No, I can't. I started going 3 seconds in. I hadn't even finished a single deep breath yet. You're like, yep. Let's engage. I can't watch you do nothing. Right? It's just a different strategy. So when you're looking at the top numbers, this is the thing that I would communicate, especially we haven't even talked about instincts and other things, but anybody who's listening who knows anything about 8 or high in 8, especially females who are high in 8, a female 8 is weaponized probably more than almost any other number because people don't know how to be around strong feminine energy, especially in the church, especially in Western culture, because they're fragile, immature, weak, masculine energy. I don't care how you look at it. Okay. Yeah. No matter what your perspective is of God, the Holy Spirit is divine feminine energy. Wisdom is called a she in the scripture all the time. There is more than just masculine energy to God. And if that's a hard theology for you, I recommend you read your Bible. Okay. So that's me practicing a little bit of 8, which is not my highest. Okay. So I feel a little uncomfortable, but I'm going to be okay because I'm with Brooke. She'll help me. She'll be like, keep going. I like it. Set it on fire.
I do like it.
But when you're talking about 8 energy is the seat of physical discomfort. It's the seat of being able to know how to work through something hard and continue. So if you are low in 8, it is very, very, very difficult to overcome conflict, especially conflict in your body. Like what happens when you feel an adrenaline rush? What happens when you feel intimidated? What happens when you feel scared? Because you're well practiced at that. You're fluent in what happens when your body feels unsafe. So you're like, okay, I know how to do that. Now, what becomes a gift can sometimes be a curse because you can sometimes create a level of intimidation you may not be aware of because 8s are dominant energy. So it's like, didn't mean to scare you, my bad. Especially when you're high in 2, it's like, I love you. It's tough love, but I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just trying to teach you. And at the same time, I realize you might not have the same stamina as me. I apologize for outpacing you. Let's start that over again. I do actually love you. I'm trying to clarify that, but let's slow down. Is hard for me. Okay. So when you're high in 8, the example that I would give that's very scriptural is Jesus got angry on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So the seed of physical anger and the seed of accessing that kind of intensity is an 8 conversation. But this is where you got to go back to John and realize that the verse starts with be angry. Right? It's like, it doesn't say don't be angry. It says be angry.
Right.
It's a commandment, right?
Yeah.
Because anger is a healthy emotion. Intensity is a healthy emotion. Motivation to move things forward, to flip a table, to premeditate a whip, right?
Yeah.
Jesus is both 9 and 8 when he bends down in the sand and goes, for the love of God, where's the guy in the conversation? Why did you only bring me the woman? I can't say it out loud because then everybody dies. Right. But to have the ability to move through the world, especially in a female 8 energy, it is the single greatest asset for when the entire world burns. 8 is Phoenix energy. It is the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. Man, it's like I've talked about this topic so many times, and I've said Phoenix energy like 100 times to 8. I've never said resurrection energy.
Come
so
on.
that's a Brooke-ism. That's for you, Brooke. I haven't said it in that way before. So just the context of the podcast is great.
Love it.
The only way that you can survive everything dying is if you have 8 energy. Because 8, you not only have to burn it to the ground, but it will rebuild itself from the ashes. It has to. You can't kill 8 energy. That is the seed of resurrection energy, right?
Come on.
So when you're high in 8 and high in 5, it is one of the most powerful things, because people who are high in 8 and low in 5 don't ask challenging questions. They just run people down, right? So when you're high in 5, you can ask the challenging question.
Yeah.
And with 2, do it in a way that goes, I still care about you, but the reason I care about you and the way that I care about you is to ask challenging questions. That's 8, 5, and 2 together. And then the fourth one is 3. The fourth one is going, look, I'm not just going to leave you here and ask a challenging question because I love you and then leave it there. One of the reasons that we're doing this is so that I can help you achieve your goals. 3 is the seed of power. We have to create, right? So 2 and 3 are both Holy Spirit numbers. 8 is Jesus, and then 5 is the Father. So it's a really good segue to be able to hit all 3 aspects. But when you do 2 and 3, you're like, 2 and 3 together are stewardship energy. So your 7 isn't high enough for a wing. Your 9 is definitely not high enough for a wing. So interestingly enough, when you look at all 4, your 8 doesn't pull from the 7 and the 9 for a wing. Your 5 doesn't pull from the 4 and the 6 as a wing. Your 2 and your 3 are actually your highest combo that are side by side. So when you have that combined, like if you combine your scores for 8 and 7, 8 and 9, 5 and 4, 5 and 6, I'm willing to bet that collectively your 2 and 3 will still be higher. And why that matters is because a 2 with a 3 wing I call a steward, and a 3 with a 2 wing I call a storyteller. So what ends up happening is if you ask really good clarifying questions in 5 to challenge people in 8, what you end up being able to do is steward and tell their story in much more effective ways. That's what the 2 and the 3 are doing. It's helping you tell somebody's story, understand their story, and then steward them into a way that you're creating real value in that person. But if you don't see the 2 and the 3, you miss that as a part of your leadership team. Wow. And then you step back from all of that and go, okay, and after I do all of that for someone, how does this physical body recuperate? And how do I give myself the opportunity to communicate to someone else all the things that this heart is carrying that I haven't had the space to share because there's not a safe container to do so. I've created it for other people, but I haven't necessarily experienced it on the receiving end.
Wow.
Yes.
That's pretty incredible.
That's great.
Does that land? Does that feel true for you? Because my favorite thing with 8s is 8s have no hesitation with telling you everything you're saying is BS, which is cool because especially 5s. 5s are skeptics and 8s don't even wait. They left because you just sound stupid. They're both allergic to incompetence. So when I talk to somebody who's high in 8 and 5, it helps me to validate the model real quick because they're like, no, that's not it. You're gonna have to go back and do that one over again. I'm like, okay. So I appreciate you letting me know that it feels valid for you because 8 and 5 will tell you real quick if it's not.
So Jerome, when you walk into a room, how quickly are you able to navigate this with folks? Because I would imagine you're able to see folks pretty clear.
I am. It's one of my big things that I've done as a clinician and as a person is truthfully, Jason, I've put myself into less rooms. Like this year, I did probably 150 podcasts over 7 years. This year, y'all are number 2. I've got number 3 tomorrow. Okay. I have pulled back from a lot of my creative content. I'm the only doctor that I know that had a full-time creative director. So I have pulled back a lot because, to answer your question, I can do it off of a photo.
Wow.
Yeah, if I see somebody's photo, I can probably tell you what they were going through.
Hmm.
And so
it's like so deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be able to diagnose it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and the emotionality for me that comes up is this year is a really, really heavy duty year for like rest and recovery because, my dad passed at 43. I'm 41. I'm very aware, especially as someone who's attempted suicide twice. I'm very aware of my relationship with pain and with especially physical pain. Yeah. So because I have spoken so fluently and so extensively in the relationship of pain, I feel people's pain very quickly. Yeah. It's the idea of people thinking that they understand empathy. Being empathetic and being an empath are two very different things. Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah. Right? Empathetic means I've gone through that. Empathy is I can actually take that from you. I can take it out of you. I can extract it, which is powerful as a clinician. But yeah, the biggest thing that I'm just processing as you asked me that question is I'm right in the middle of that journey where I'm revisiting the conversation with God about what it looks like to believe that I will feel the rest that I give to other people. So there's some intersectional emotions that are happening there at the same time.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. And I can imagine, we're all navigating, the whatever it was that allowed me to be able to sit in a room and then walk out and not take it with me is pretty important, I would imagine, for what you're doing. Yeah. To be able to I'm fascinated by the difference of empathy and compassion as well. Yeah. Because especially in the light of Jesus, who would be exhausted one moment and then would see a need, and then the writers didn't say he was empathetic, which I'm sure he was, but empathy is it's almost that compassion is like the Father's perspective and energy on it. Where it would say he'd be filled with compassion, and suddenly he's back in it again, and he's suddenly energized, and So I don't know if there's a delineation. I've been processing those two different words in the context of Jesus and how he's lived and ministered and operated. So we don't have you much longer.
That's okay.
By the way, folks, he did tell us we could keep him a little longer. So this, as you might know, we took advantage of it for sure.
Part 1 and Part 2. Part 3 and Part 7.
But the empathy to weep with those who weep. Mm-hmm. Jesus wept. Yeah. And then compassion, I've always looked at in that story where, he calls Lazarus forth. He weeps, but also knows the end of the story is resurrection, and that compassion is actually participating in that.
It is.
And so I pray that over you. But as you're in this season and navigating, I don't know if you have thoughts there before
I do. Yeah, I'll just give you something quick. Yeah. 2 books that are really good for readers to listen to, especially in faith-based spaces, because this can be the road to hell is paved with good intentions at times. Sure. Is Toxic Charity and When Helping Hurts are 2 really, really good books for going, there's a difference between kindness and compassion. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Yeah. And here's the thing, especially from an Enneagram perspective, a lot of people are like, I'm compassionate. And I'm like, here's the difference, okay? 4 is the seat of compassion. 2 is the seat of kindness. 4 is a hospice worker. 2 is a midwife, okay? 2 is a doula. 4 is a death doula. So the difference between that is if you want to go, am I practicing compassion? The word compassion, C-O-M, means communal, together with, and passion in Latin means suffering. They didn't call it the enjoyment of the Christ. Okay, they called it the passion of the Christ, right? Yeah. Passion means to suffer. So when you're practicing compassion, you don't practice compassion from the sidelines. You suffer with. You feel that person's pain, not as an observer, but as a participant. So compassion is always when Jesus weeps and he sees that, when he's filled with compassion, what you're actually hearing is he's filled with their actual suffering. That's what he feels. Yeah. But the difference between 2 and 4 and kind of the way that we show up and we support is 4 can be in the midst of someone's pain as an Enneagram type and not even desire to fix it.
Right.
They're not there to change it. They're there to be present with it. That is the gap with Jesus saying, I can't do this and your will be done. He was met with unadulterated compassion. He did not get a solution. He got presence.
Wow.
But the difference in 2 is the degree to which you can last being around other people's pain is your relationship with 4. If you are in a space with somebody and you desire and you start to generate some way to resolve their pain, and it's actually a reflection of your capacity for managing being in a space that feels uncomfortable.
Wow.
So 2 desires to steward and to serve and to fix and to resolve and to bring life as a midwife.
Wow.
But 4 is like, I'm going to be in the midst of your suffering. And in fact, if you die, I just want to be with you as you die.
Wow. Powerful.
Or as this thing dies in you.
Sure.
So 4, less language. 2, more language. So if you're in the middle of someone suffering and you start talking, 4 is Job's friends before they open their mouth. Right? As soon as they started talking, 4 left the room and Job was left to suffer on his own. So if you want to be compassionate, presence over process and presence over language, for sure.
Huge.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's an unnatural place to shift the tacos. But we've had you for 2 hours, and I feel honored that we got you for your second podcast of 3 for the year.
Yeah.
And I want to honor your time with us.
Thank you, sir.
Rethinking God with tacos.
Yeah.
Because it's a relational way by which to rethink.
Yeah.
To gather around a table and to not get too serious, and in the context of this conversation, engage in every aspect of our humanity.
Yeah.
You got a taco story?
I do. I was laughing about this because when you guys invited me and I saw the notes and I was like, do you have a taco story? I went, man, when's the last time I love tacos, but I think
good.
cilantro is the devil's dandruff, and anybody who disagrees, I'm sorry that you haven't met the Lord yet. But cilantro for me legit tastes like somebody put a bar of Dial soap in my mouth and covered the food in literal soap suds. It's horrible. So I love tacos, but I also cannot experience tacos without the sheer level of effort that it takes to go, you sure no cilantro? Like, it doesn't say it on the menu, but you sure? Like,
you get
no.
Dressed right off the bat, anxiety.
Hey man, I'm like, hey man, I have the gift of thinking far ahead, and I know that you guys don't think that there's cilantro in this because it's not on the menu, but I'd just like for you to double check. And here's the thing. The reason these things become fluent in us is because they're legitimized. They're validated. And 3 out of 4 times that I ask you sure, it's there. And now I've avoided the suffering of cilantro, right? So, but when we were talking about this, it's like, man, what's the last time that I can think about tacos? And I had so many different experiences with tacos, but then I get home and my wife's like, hey, we're having taco night. And I'm like, we have 3 kids that are 8, 6, and 4. We have never done a taco night. And what it was that we invited a friend of ours over who their experience with family dynamics and chosen family and spiritual spaces is very, very unsafe. They have a lot of history around being very, very unsafe. So to come into our house and be a part of our family and to have that space to be in a home that feels approachable is very important. And that person has chosen family for us. And they requested tacos. So I was like, oh, cool, tacos.
There it is.
So one part of it being able to be in a space where we're offering a container that is very unavailable to this person on a regular basis is just such a gift.
Yeah.
And the thing that actually ended up happening that I think is, the story connection and the metaphor that I would offer everybody is yesterday was a very difficult day for me physically. I had my number one trigger for migraines is barometric pressure change. And in Atlanta, we have a schizophrenic relationship with pressure. It's bipolar. It's all over the place. It doesn't know who it wants to be. Okay. So it is a difficult experience for me when the weather keeps shifting dramatically and you step out of your air conditioned car and your glasses fog up and you can't see. And you're like, this is a metaphor for my life. Everything is foggy. so we have this, and my wife is an incredible cook. We've been married 20 years. She was 19, I was 21. She has poor vision and bad judgment, and she's a wonderful cook. Okay. So I got a very wonderful woman who's a great cook, who struggles to feed a husband who sometimes isn't hungry. Most of the times isn't hungry, because, you know, you don't want to eat when your head and neck are stuck in the bear trap.
Right.
So I'm sitting there last night, and she's got a brisket that she's made for 8 hours, and she's baked it and cooked it, and there's all the toppings, and she even got the tortillas that I like. I'm like, I'm out. I got nothing. I put a single bite of food in my mouth, I'm going to vomit. I feel really off. And we're watching a Copa America match with Argentina and Messi, and my 8-year-old's repeating all my language about people flopping on the ground, and we're having a great time. Everybody's laughing. It's a wonderful space. It gets to 8, it gets to 9, it gets to 9:30. And the entire time that we're having this experience, from 6 o'clock until 9 o'clock, I am actively trying not to do self-recrimination here. I'm actively trying to tell myself there's not anything wrong with me, because we've created this entire environment for us to have tacos together, and I'm still the guy who's not eating food because I still don't feel good, right? And what I started to do, I do a process with the kids called check-in, right? So you just put your hand on your chest, you breathe. We say there's no bears, just bubbles, right? Because your brain can't tell the difference between your left hand and your right hand, so everything's scary until it isn't. You think you're being chased by a bear in the woods, it's just tacos. So I'm blowing bubbles, like, in the room, like, when I'm just checking in, I'm giving myself that safe touch, safe movement, connecting to my body, making the choice to blow bubbles, just doing my thing. And about 9:30, my appetite hit so hard. And I'm like, dadgummit, I tell people not to eat after 9, and I know I'm hungry. So my wife's put everything up. The kitchen's clean. Match is over. It's 9:30. I'm supposed to be in bed by 10. So now I'm having a whole nother conversation about, do I eat the tacos? What do I do right now? And what ended up happening was, I was like, look, man, it's one of those things where there's so many examples in scripture and so many examples in clinical world, that this is where the phrase came up, and this is a phrase that I would give you, is don't ask for what you already have. Right? If you're asking for it and you don't have it yet, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if I keep asking for appetite, and I keep asking for the opportunity to be kind to myself, and then all of a sudden the appetite shows up and I have the opportunity to be kind to myself, I don't need to continue going, but I wish I had an appetite an hour ago. I wish I could have an appetite tomorrow. Don't continue to ask for what you already have, even if it's only there for a moment. So what I chose to do is, I'm going to go make some tacos.
Yeah.
And I ended up eating, and my wife was like, and this is a great thing. Like, this is why my wife and I are best friends. She's so good to me. And I get done eating, obviously still relevant, because, you know, as my older brother says, when tears show up, the Holy Spirit's there.
That's good.
But I finish eating, and all of the stuff that I'm telling myself about how I'm the doctor that has migraines and I wish I just had an appetite, and all the laundry list of things that I'm telling myself I'm missing and doing wrong, my wife just looks at me and goes, "Thank you for eating."
Yeah.
She's like, she goes, "I'm so glad that you ate. How was it?" She didn't ask me how the food was. She didn't say, "Hey, was it good? Did you like it?"
Yeah.
She didn't ask about herself. She validated and acknowledged me. She said, "Thank you for eating." And then she said, "I'm so glad that you ate." And I was like, yeah, I don't, in that moment, as the 8-year-old version of me, didn't need to be told that I'd missed it. I just need to be acknowledged, and to have someone say, "Hey man, thank you so much for recognizing that 9:30 is still a good time to eat tacos." Right? And that's okay. And it was. They were great. Like, if you guys ever need a taco recipe for brisket, my wife has got it. So, yeah, long story short, man, tacos. It just worked out last night that this human being is trying to be a healthier, whole version of himself. I think more than anything keeps reinforcing this idea that even if I'm still working through things, even when Paul has a name change, an entire identity change, and even gets to talk to God 3 times, sometimes the answer is no. And then I get to decide what kind of life I live if the answer is no, with the idea that maybe I still have Job on the table. I don't know. I don't know. But for now, I'm in a process of where my relationship with tacos and eating and trying is that at some point, even if it's 9:30 at night, that's okay. If I can find it, I can find it. And when I have it, I can stop asking for it.
That's so good.
That's the best taco story we've heard in a minute.
Yeah, bro.
That's a pretty powerful taco story.
Thank you.
I pray grace and wonder over you.
Thank you.
In these days ahead, honored that we get to do this with you.
Same.
Get to know you a little bit. You're incredibly present. You remind me a little bit of the fellow we started talking about at the beginning with Paul Young. Present in the moment. Paulism is that everything in my life has led to this moment, and this is significant. And I feel some significance on this conversation, having met you, being seen, and being able to see you. This is powerful.
Thank you, sir.
Share a little bit, and we'll do this on the front end too. But you've already said it's drjerome.com.
Yeah.
And then Thrive. What's the other website?
Thrive Human Care. Yeah. Which human care is not a real word. It's just healthcare takes care of the industry and we take care of the person. So it's Thrive Human Care. So the separation is, if somebody wants to have a conversation with Dr. Jerome, the clinician, is Thrive Human Care. If somebody wants to have a conversation with Dr. Jerome, the neurotheologian, Enneagram scientist, then that's on drjerome.com. And also a great resource if anybody's like, I actually like listening to this guy. He's got interesting things to say. A really great website is Listen Notes, that if you just Google Listen Notes, it's a podcast aggregator. And if you just put in my name, the benefits of a unique name, Jerome Lubbe, it will pull up every podcast that has been published over the last 6 years. And then you can just listen to whatever content you want. There's a really good one that I enjoy for people who are more Christ-centric. I did a podcast called The Zeitgeist with Jonathan Martin that was a 2-part series on the neurotheology of God. And I walked through the Enneagram over a 2-part conversation of how Jesus shows up in each of the types. And that can be a really great introduction to how the Enneagram applies to our lives as believers, especially as a safe and approachable tool, because sometimes there can be some conflict in how to engage it based on what some folks are under the impression the Enneagram is about. But the beauty of the way that God exists is we can have really good, healthy conversations, and that one tends to be a better one for folks to connect to. But Listen Notes, drjerome.com and thrivehumancare.com, all of those will give you all the resources that you need to keep you happy for a little while.
A while.
Yeah.
Yes, and I can't recommend it enough. We've been diving in over the last few days and over the last weeks, but knowing that I was going to be talking with you the last few days especially. But
yeah.
Grateful for you, grateful for this conversation. I think it's going to impact and encourage a whole lot of folks, and love what you're doing. Get to connect with you, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you guys. It was a gift.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much.
It
was really great.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, myself, or our guests, you can go to afamilystory.org. You can also go to afamilystory.org if you'd like to give. This is a listener-supported podcast, and we are incredibly grateful for your generosity. Hey, we have a Facebook group, and it's pretty cool. Rethinking God with Tacos. You can join us over there. Lots of incredible conversation and community taking place on that page. And you can also follow us on all the socials, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and others. Hey, I'd love it also if you went on iTunes and left a review or shared or tweeted or liked the podcast. Let your friends know that this is a good place to hear about the love of God. I pray grace and wonder over your day.